Step into the enchanting world of Charleston, South Carolina, and prepare to be swept away by the Moonlight Letters, a love unfinished, a full-length romance audiobook that weaves together history, mystery, and a heartwarming second-chance love story. Chapter 1. Dust and Echoes. The wrought iron gate creaked open like a sigh, a sound swallowed almost immediately by the humid Charleston air. Evelyn Carter stepped onto the overgrown path, her sensible walking shoes crunching on fallen leaves and shattered bits of oyster shells, a pathway material unique, as she recalled from her many years immersed in this region, to the Low Country's historic estates. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather satchel, the familiar weight of her notepad and pen a comfort against the unfamiliar thrill of this new venture. Retirement had been restful, certainly, but also surprisingly empty. The quiet hum of her meticulously organized home library, once a sanctuary, had begun to feel like a cage. This, she hoped, was the key to unlocking it. The shadowed facade of the Beaumont house loomed before her, a relic of a bygone era, its once grand columns now draped with Spanish moss that swayed like ghostly curtains. 3 stories of faded grandeur, its weathered clapboard siding whispered stories of lavish balls, whispered secrets, and perhaps whispered love. It was the perhaps that had drawn Evelyn here, away from her curated life and into the heart of a mystery. She'd found the advertisement tucked into the back pages of the Charleston Historical Society Quarterly, volunteer needed, assist in cataloging historical documents at Beaumont House. The brevity of the notice, the almost dismissive tone, had intrigued her. The Beaumont House, once the jewel of Charleston society, was now slated for demolition, a victim of progress and a developer's insatiable hunger for prime real estate. A modern hotel, they promised, would rise in its place, a sterile monument to fleeting trends, erasing centuries of history. Evelyn, however, believed in the enduring power of the past. She'd spent her career as a historian meticulously piecing together the fragmented narratives of lives long gone, breathing life back into forgotten voices. Retirement hadn't diminished that passion, it had merely redirected it. She reached the massive front door, its wood scarred and faded, the brass knocker tarnished green with age. Taking a deep breath, bracing herself, Evelyn knocked with a force that surprised her. The sound echoed through the silent house, a hollow, resonant boom that seemed to vibrate in the very air around her. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Just as she was about to knock again, the door creaked inward, revealing a woman who could only be described as a faded southern belle. Tall and willowy, with a cloud of silver hair piled atop her head, she wore a dress that seemed to have been plucked from a vintage photograph, a floral print in muted blues and grays, cinched at the waist with a faded velvet ribbon. Her eyes, however, were sharp and assessing, the color of aged jade. "You must be the historian," the woman said, her voice a husky drawl, laced with a hint of suspicion. "Miss Carter, is it?" "Evelyn Carter, yes," Evelyn replied, extending her hand. "Thank you for having me, Miss Beaumont," the woman said, her grip surprisingly firm. "Amelia Beaumont. I'm the last of the line, I suppose. The last one clinging to this burden." Her gaze swept over the decaying grandeur of the entrance hall, a flicker of sadness in her eyes.
"Come in, come in."
"Don't stand there gawking like a tourist." Evelyn followed Miss Beaumont into the dimly lit interior. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old wood, a palpable sense of time standing still. Sunlight filtered weakly through the tall, arched windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. The entrance hall was vast, with a sweeping staircase that curved upwards into the shadows. Faded portraits lined the walls, their subjects staring down with an air of aristocratic disapproval. "The documents are in the attic," Miss Beaumont said, leading the way towards the staircase. "Been up there for as long as I can remember. My father had some notion of preserving them, but he never got around to it." And now she trailed off, her voice heavy with resignation. Evelyn's heart quickened. An untouched collection of documents in a house like this? It was a historian's dream. A dream she hadn't realized she still harbored. She almost said something about her expertise, about the years spent with brittle paper and faded ink, but the woman's tight-lipped expression halted the offer. The attic was a cavernous space, stretching the entire length of the house. Sunlight streamed in through dusty dormer windows, illuminating rows upon rows of wooden crates, stacked haphazardly against the walls. Cobwebs hung like macabre decorations, and the air was thick with the scent of decay and something else. A faint, floral fragrance, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. "Well, there you have it," Miss Beaumont said, gesturing vaguely towards the crates.
A mess.
"I doubt there's anything of value in there," but the Historical Society insisted. "Something about preserving Charleston's heritage. Sentimental nonsense, if you ask me." Evelyn ignored the dismissive remark. She was already moving towards the nearest crate, her fingers itching to delve into its contents. She carefully pried open the lid, revealing a jumble of papers, yellowed with age, tied together with faded ribbons. "I'll leave you to it," Miss Beaumont said, turning to leave. "I have other matters to attend to." Her footsteps echoed down the attic stairs, leaving Evelyn alone in the silence. For hours, Evelyn worked, carefully sifting through the contents of the crates. Most of the documents were mundane household accounts, receipts, inventories of furniture and linens. But then, in a small, wooden box tucked away in the corner of one crate, she found them. Letters.
Dozens of them.
Tied together with a delicate silk ribbon, the envelopes were addressed in a flowing, feminine hand, but there were no stamps, no postmarks. They were unsent. Evelyn carefully untied the ribbon, her heart beating faster. She selected one of the letters at random, the paper fragile beneath her fingertips. As she unfolded it, a faint scent wafted up, the same floral fragrance she'd noticed earlier. Rosewater. The date at the top of the page read, June 12th, 1863. The letter began, "My dearest love, the days crawl by like wounded soldiers, each one a testament to the agonizing distance between us." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. These weren't just letters, they were love letters. Unsent love letters, written during the height of the Civil War. A hidden romance, a secret story waiting to be told. And within that secret, Evelyn felt a stirring, a reawakening of her own passion, a sense that she, too, had a story waiting to unfold. She didn't yet know it was going to involve fighting for this home, for its history, and, surprisingly, for a new chapter in her own life. The arrival of the skeptical novelist was still hours away, but the seed of that future connection was already planted, hidden within the dust and echoes of the Beaumont house attic. She looked up at a broken window pane. This was going to take more than just her. Chapter 2. The scent of rosewater. The rosewater perfume clung to the paper, a ghostly reminder of the woman who had penned these words over a century ago. Evelyn carefully smoothed out the fragile sheet, her fingers tracing the elegant script. The handwriting was beautiful, a testament to a time when penmanship was an art form. The ink, though faded, still held a vibrant intensity, reflecting the passion of the words themselves. "I wear the locket you gave me close to my heart, its coolness a constant reminder of your touch. The photograph inside, though small, captures your essence, your smile, the light in your eyes that I long to see again. I fear, my love, that this war will never end, that we will be forever separated by this cruel chasm of circumstance." Evelyn felt a pang of sympathy for the unknown woman. The raw emotion in the letter was palpable, a timeless expression of love and longing. She glanced at the small, wooden box where she'd found the letters. Nestled amongst them was a velvet pouch, its drawstring pulled tight. With trembling fingers, Evelyn loosened the drawstring and gently tipped the contents onto her palm. A locket, silver, intricately engraved with a delicate floral pattern, its surface dulled with age. She carefully opened it, revealing a miniature portrait of a woman. Young, beautiful, with dark, expressive eyes and a wistful smile. It was undoubtedly the woman who had written the letters. The unknown woman. Evelyn felt a surge of excitement. This wasn't just a collection of letters, it was a tangible link to the past, a window into a life lived and a love lost. She carefully placed the locket back in the pouch and continued reading, each letter adding another layer to the unfolding story. The woman's name was Eliza, and her beloved was addressed only as R. Their correspondence painted a vivid picture of life in Charleston during the Civil War, the anxieties, the hardships, the constant fear of loss. But amidst the darkness, their love shone through, a beacon of hope in a world torn apart by conflict. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the attic floor, Evelyn realized she'd been completely engrossed for hours. The silence of the house had been broken only by the rustle of paper and the occasional creak of the old building settling. She felt a strange connection to Eliza, a kinship that transcended time. A sudden noise from downstairs startled her. A door slamming, followed by the sound of voices, one sharp and impatient, the other deeper, laced with a weary cynicism. Evelyn carefully placed the letters back in the box, a sense of unease settling over her. She knew, instinctively, that the arrival of these new voices marked a turning point in her quiet, solitary endeavor. She descended the attic stairs, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The voices were coming from the entrance hall. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw Amelia Beaumont standing by the front door, her arms crossed, her expression tight with disapproval. Facing her was a man, tall and lean, with a shock of dark hair streaked with silver, framing a face that was both handsome and world-weary. He had intelligent, piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at a glance. He was dressed casually, in jeans and a slightly rumpled linen shirt, a worn leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder. This had to be Lucas Hawthorne. The advertisement she'd placed in the Charleston Historical Society Quarterly, seeking a writer to help her craft Eliza's story, had only garnered that single response. She'd researched him, of course. Lucas Hawthorne, acclaimed novelist, known for his historical fiction, particularly his series set during the Civil War. He had a reputation for meticulous research and a gift for bringing the past to life. He also had a reputation for being difficult, reclusive, cynical. "I told you, Miss Beaumont," the man was saying, his voice laced with a hint of impatience. "I'm here at the request of Miss Carter."
Is it?
I received a rather cryptic response to my inquiry about the project. Cryptic? Amelia Beaumont scoffed. "It's a waste of time, Mr. Hawthorne. I've told you, and I've told the Historical Society, there's nothing of value here. This house is coming down." Evelyn stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Miss Beaumont, Mr. Hawthorne, I apologize for the misunderstanding." She extended her hand to the man. "Evelyn Carter. I'm the one who placed the advertisement." Lucas Hawthorne took her hand, his grip firm and surprisingly warm. His blue eyes studied her intently, a flicker of curiosity and perhaps something else in their depths. "Lucas Hawthorne," he replied, his voice smoother than she expected. "So, Miss Carter, you believe there's a story hidden in this ramshackle pile?" Evelyn met his gaze, her own determination hardening. "I know there is, Mr. Hawthorne. I've found something extraordinary." She hesitated, then added, "And I believe it's a story that deserves to be told." He raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement playing on his lips. "Extraordinary, you say?" "In my experience, extraordinary usually translates to mildly interesting, at best." "Perhaps," Evelyn said, a faint smile touching her lips. "But I think even a cynic like you might be surprised." She led him towards the staircase, her hand hovering over the banister, a nervous energy coursing through her. She could feel his gaze on her, assessing, questioning. She knew she was taking a risk, entrusting this precious discovery to a man who seemed to view the world with a jaded eye. But there was something about him, a spark of intelligence, a hint of vulnerability beneath the cynical facade, that gave her hope. "The letters are in the attic," she said, her voice steady. "Unsent love letters, written during the Civil War. They smell of rosewater." He paused at the foot of the stairs, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "Rosewater?" he repeated, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. The cynical mask seemed to slip, just for a moment, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath. It was a fleeting glimpse, but it was enough. Evelyn knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that she had made the right choice. The story of Eliza and perhaps her own story, were about to be written. Chapter 3. A Skeptic's Shadow. The climb to the attic felt different this time. With Lucas Hawthorne's presence behind her, Evelyn was acutely aware of the silence, the weight of the house's history, and the skeptical shadow he cast both literally and figuratively on her hopeful endeavor. His earlier reaction to Rosewater, that brief softening of his cynical demeanor, lingered in her mind, a puzzling anomaly. He moved with a surprising grace for a man his age, his long strides easily keeping pace with her. Evelyn couldn't help but steal glances at him, noting the way the sunlight from the dormer windows caught the silver in his hair, the way his brow furrowed in concentration as he surveyed the cluttered attic. He exuded an air of quiet intensity, a sense of someone who observed the world with a keen, analytical eye, the eye of a writer, she supposed. "So," he said, his voice echoing in the vast space, "these letters, you believe they're significant?" Evelyn led him to the corner, where she'd left the wooden box. "See for yourself." He knelt beside the box, his movements deliberate, almost hesitant. He lifted the lid, his gaze sweeping over the jumble of yellowed envelopes tied with faded ribbons. He picked one up, his fingers tracing the delicate script.
He didn't open it, though.
Instead, he looked up at Evelyn, his blue eyes questioning. "They're unsent," she explained. "Written by a woman named Eliza during the Civil War, to a man she addressed only as R. They speak of a deep love, a forbidden love, I suspect, given the circumstances." Lucas finally selected a letter, carefully untied the ribbon, and unfolded the fragile paper. He read silently, his expression unreadable. Evelyn watched him, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She had poured her heart and soul into these letters, had felt Eliza's emotions as if they were her own. What if he dismissed them? What if he saw them as nothing more than sentimental relics of a bygone era? The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rustle of the paper as he turned the pages. Finally, he looked up, his expression changed. The cynicism was still there, but it was tempered by something else. Curiosity, perhaps. And something deeper, something that resonated with that fleeting vulnerability she'd glimpsed downstairs. "The writing is remarkable," he admitted, his voice low. "Vivid, emotionally raw. It's almost as if she's speaking directly to you, across the centuries." Evelyn nodded, relieved. "That's how I felt. It's like I know her." He continued to read, selecting another letter, and then another. He seemed lost in Eliza's world, his brow furrowed in concentration, his lips moving slightly as he silently mouthed the words. Evelyn watched him, fascinated. She saw the writer in him now, the man who could appreciate the power of words, the ability of language to transport us to another time, another place. "There's a locket," she said, breaking the silence, "with a photograph of Eliza." He looked up, his interest piqued. Evelyn retrieved the velvet pouch and handed it to him. He carefully opened the locket, his gaze fixed on the miniature portrait. He stared at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he slowly closed the locket, his fingers lingering on its surface. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Evelyn nodded, her heart aching for the unknown woman, and perhaps for something else she couldn't quite define. A shared sense of longing, a recognition of the enduring power of love, even in the face of loss. He looked back at the box, his eyes still clouded. "This are any idea who he was?" "Not yet," Evelyn admitted. "There are hints, references to his family, to his work, but nothing concrete. That's part of the mystery. And part of what I hoped you could help me with." He met her gaze, a flicker of challenge in his eyes. "You want to publish this? Turn it into a book?" Evelyn hesitated. "I hadn't thought that far ahead. My initial goal was simply to understand, to preserve Eliza's story. But yes, I suppose, ultimately, I would like to share it with the world." She added, with a touch of defiance, "Don't you think it deserves to be heard?" He smiled, a wry, almost cynical smile. "Deserves? Sentimentality, Miss Carter, is a dangerous thing, especially in the publishing world." He paused, then added more gently, "But yes, I suppose it does. If it's as compelling as you say." A sudden thought struck Evelyn. Mr. Hawthorne, you mentioned a cryptic response to your inquiry.
What did you mean by that?
He hesitated, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. Your advertisement, it mentioned a hidden history, a lost romance. And well, I have a personal interest in such stories. He looked away, his gaze fixed on the dusty window panes. I lost someone a long time ago. A woman I loved. We were separated by circumstances, by mistakes. I never quite got over it. Evelyn felt a surge of empathy. She understood now, the weariness in his eyes, the cynicism that masked a deeper pain. He wasn't just a writer looking for a story, he was a man searching for something more. Closure, perhaps. Redemption. I understand, she said softly. I may be retired, but I also know what it is to search for answers. He looked back at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to understand, she realized. He'd expected her to be different. A naive, sentimental old woman, lost in the past. He hadn't expected a kindred spirit. One of the letters he began, his voice rough, holding one up by its corner, mentions a specific oak tree, one struck by lightning, down by the river. Does that mean anything to you in the context of this estate? Evelyn frowned. There is an old oak down by the Ashley. On the property line, it's been there for centuries. It was struck by lightning, decades ago. I believe her voice trailed off. Something was clicking. A memory. A story her own grandmother used to tell. He watched her, patient, waiting. The skeptic was still present, but for the first time, Evelyn sensed a genuine partner in him, a co-conspirator in this unfolding mystery. The shadow he cast was still there, but it was no longer entirely a shadow of doubt. It was, perhaps, a shadow of shared loss, a shadow of hope. And it was, definitely, a shadow that was about to lead them both into a much deeper, more personal story than either of them had anticipated. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Library. The memory, hazy at first, sharpened with the suddenness of a developed photograph. Evelyn recalled her grandmother, a Charleston native herself, speaking of a local legend, a whispered tale of star-crossed lovers who met secretly beneath a lightning-scarred oak tree by the Ashley River. The lovers, separated by family feuds and the looming shadow of the Civil War, were said to have buried a box of letters beneath the tree, a testament to their enduring love. The oak tree, Evelyn said, her voice filled with a growing excitement. Mr. Hawthorne, I think we need to go there.
Now.
Lucas, initially taken aback by her sudden urgency, quickly recovered. The skepticism that had defined him earlier seemed to melt away, replaced by a spark of genuine interest, a willingness to follow this thread of the past wherever it might lead. Lead the way, Miss Carter, he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. They left the attic, the box of letters carefully tucked under Lucas's arm. Amelia Beaumont was nowhere to be seen, a fact that Evelyn found both relieving and unsettling. The silence of the house seemed to press in on them as they descended the stairs and made their way out into the late afternoon sun. The grounds of Beaumont House were as overgrown and neglected as the house itself. Weeds choked the once manicured flower beds, and the pathways were crumbling and uneven. But even in its state of decay, the estate retained a sense of faded grandeur, a whisper of its former glory. Evelyn led Lucas towards the back of the property, following a winding path that led through a tangle of overgrown shrubs and towering magnolias. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and decaying leaves, a bittersweet aroma that spoke of both life and death, of beauty and loss. As they neared the river, the sound of rushing water filled the air. The Ashley River, wide and brown, flowed past the edge of the property, its current swift and strong. And there on the bank stood the oak tree. It was massive, ancient, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like the arms of a giant. A deep scar ran down its trunk, a testament to the lightning strike that had cleaved it in two decades ago. But the tree had survived, its resilience a symbol of enduring strength. Lucas set the box of letters down on the ground, his gaze fixed on the tree. He seemed mesmerized, lost in thought. Evelyn watched him, wondering what memories, what emotions, were stirring within him. "This is it," she said softly. "This is the tree Eliza mentioned in her letter." He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the scarred trunk. "It's remarkable," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's exactly as she described it." Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine. The connection between Eliza's letters and this physical place, this tangible link to the past, was almost overwhelming. It was as if the veil between the centuries had thinned, allowing them to glimpse a moment in time, a moment of love and longing. "The legend," Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly, "says that the lovers buried a box of letters beneath the tree." Lucas looked at her, his blue eyes intense. "Do you believe it?" Evelyn hesitated. I don't know. But I feel like we have to look. We have to see if it's true." He nodded, his expression determined. "Then let's look." They began to search the ground around the base of the tree, their hands brushing aside fallen leaves and twigs, their fingers probing the soft earth. The air was thick with anticipation, with the unspoken hope that they were on the verge of a discovery that would change everything. They worked in silence, their movements synchronized, their shared purpose creating a bond between them. Evelyn felt a growing sense of connection to Lucas, a sense of camaraderie that transcended their initial skepticism and mistrust. They were partners now, united in their quest to uncover the truth. After what seemed like an eternity, Lucas's fingers brushed against something hard, something buried beneath the surface. He stopped, his breath catching in his throat. I think I've found something," he said, his voice hoarse. He carefully dug away the surrounding earth, revealing a small, wooden box, its wood rotted and decayed, its metal hinges rusted and broken. It was almost identical to the box they'd found in the attic. Evelyn knelt beside him, her heart pounding with excitement. They looked at each other, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared wonder, of disbelief, of profound connection. With trembling hands, Lucas lifted the lid of the box. It crumbled in his grasp, revealing a jumble of papers, even more fragile and decayed than the letters in the attic. But amidst the fragments, they could make out the familiar flowing script, the faint scent of rose water still clinging to the paper. They had found them. The lost letters. The final chapter of Eliza's story. Or perhaps not the final chapter. Perhaps a new beginning. As they carefully lifted the fragile documents from their resting place, a single, folded piece of paper, detached from the others, fell to the ground. Lucas picked it up, his brow furrowing as he unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle with age. The headline, in bold, black letters, read, "Local soldier killed in action." Beneath the headline was a photograph of a young man, in uniform, his eyes gazing out with a haunting intensity. A name was printed beneath. Captain Robert Hawthorne. Lucas stared at the clipping, his face paling, his hands trembling. Evelyn watched him, her heart sinking. She recognized the name.
Hawthorne.
It was Lucas's last name. And the soldier in the photograph, he bore a striking resemblance to Lucas himself. "Robert," Lucas whispered, his voice choked with emotion. He was my great-great-grandfather." He looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and grief.
This
changes everything." The whispers in the library of his own family history had just become a shout. And Evelyn knew, with chilling certainty, that their quest had just become intensely, and perhaps dangerously, personal. Chapter 5. The Locket's Secret. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, like the humid Charleston air before a storm. Lucas stared at the newspaper clipping, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Evelyn watched him, her own emotions a turbulent mix of empathy and apprehension. The connection between Eliza's story and Lucas's family history was undeniable, a twist of fate that neither of them could have predicted. "Your great-great-grandfather," Evelyn said softly, breaking the silence. "He was R?" Lucas nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the photograph. It has to be. The name, the resemblance, it's too much of a coincidence." He looked up at Evelyn, his gaze searching. "But how? How did his letters end up here, in the Beaumont house?" Evelyn didn't have an answer. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but they were still far from forming a complete picture. The connection between the Beaumonts and the Hawthorns, the reason for the unsent letters, the identity of Eliza, all these questions remained unanswered. They carefully gathered the fragile documents from the buried box, placing them alongside the letters from the attic. The sheer volume of correspondence was overwhelming, a testament to the depth of Eliza and Robert's love and the tragedy of their separation. As they walked back towards the house, a sense of unease settled over Evelyn. The discovery of a newspaper clipping had shifted the focus of their investigation, making it intensely personal for Lucas. She worried about the emotional toll it was taking on him, the way it was dredging up a past he had clearly tried to bury. Back in the dusty attic, they spread the letters out on a large table, carefully separating the newly discovered documents from the original collection. The faint scent of rosewater filled the air, a ghostly reminder of Eliza's presence. Lucas picked up the locket containing Eliza's portrait, his fingers tracing its intricate design. He stared at the image, his expression a mixture of fascination and sadness. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "And there's something familiar about her. I can't quite place it." Evelyn studied the portrait, her own gaze drawn to Eliza's eyes. There was a spark of intelligence there, a hint of defiance, that resonated with her. She felt a growing sense of kinship with this unknown woman, a connection that transcended time and circumstance. "We need to learn more about her," Evelyn said. "About Eliza and Robert and their relationship to the Beaumonts." Lucas nodded in agreement. The answer must be here, in these letters, or in some other record associated with this house. He looked at Evelyn, his expression determined. "We need to go through everything systematically. Every document, every diary, every scrap of paper." They began to work, dividing the letters between them, carefully reading each one, searching for clues. Hours passed, the only sounds the rustle of paper and the occasional sigh or muttered exclamation. As Evelyn read through one of Eliza's letters, a particular passage caught her attention. "I fear for Robert, for his safety, for the future we may never have. I have confided in my cousin, Amelia, the only one who knows our secret. She has promised to help us, to keep our letters safe. Should anything happen, Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Amelia, the same name as the current owner of Beaumont House. Could it be a coincidence? Or was there a direct lineage, a connection that spanned the generations? She showed the passage to Lucas, her finger pointing to the name. He read it, his brow furrowing in concentration. Amelia Beaumont, he said slowly. It can't be a coincidence. There has to be a connection. Suddenly, Evelyn remembered something else. The locket, the intricate engraving on its surface. It wasn't just a random floral pattern, it was a specific design, a family crest, perhaps. She picked up the locket, examining it closely. And then she saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible inscription, hidden within the intricate design. Initials.
Up.
Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Lucas, her eyes wide with realization. "The locket," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not just Eliza's. It's Amelia Beaumont's. Or at least it belonged to an Amelia Beaumont." Lucas took the locket, his own fingers tracing the inscription. He stared at it for a long moment, his expression a mixture of shock and understanding. "The Amelia in the letters," he said slowly. "Eliza's cousin, she must have been this Amelia's ancestor. Great-grandmother, perhaps?" The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. Eliza and Robert, separated by war and family disapproval, had entrusted their letters to Eliza's cousin, Amelia Beaumont. Amelia, for reasons unknown, had kept the letters hidden, passing them down through the generations until they had ended up in the attic of Beaumont House. And now, the current Amelia Beaumont, the last of the line, was unknowingly about to destroy the very evidence of her family's hidden history. The locket's secret had revealed a crucial link, a connection between the past and the present. But it had also raised a new and more pressing question. Why had Amelia Beaumont kept the letters hidden? And what was she so determined to protect? The answer, they knew, lay somewhere within the walls of Beaumont House, and within the complex and potentially dangerous relationship between the Beaumonts and the Hawthorns. Their quest had just taken another turn, and the stakes were higher than ever. Chapter 6. Hawthorn's Past. The weight of the discovered connection pressed down on Lucas. The realization that his family history was intertwined with Eliza's and with the Beaumont house itself was a revelation that both intrigued and unsettled him. He felt a pull, a sense of obligation, to uncover the truth, not just for Eliza and Robert, but for himself, for his own understanding of his past. He looked at Evelyn, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the attic's single working light bulb. He saw the determination in her eyes, the passion for history that mirrored his own, albeit his was often masked by a layer of cynicism. He realized, with a start, that he was no longer just a writer assisting a historian, he was a participant in this story, a character in a drama that had spanned generations. "We need to talk to Amelia Beaumont," he said, his voice firm. "The current one. We need to find out what she knows." Evelyn nodded in agreement. "But we need to be careful. She's already dismissed our research as sentimental nonsense. She clearly wants this house gone." Lucas considered this. "She's hiding something. There's a reason she's so eager to demolish this place. And I suspect it has something to do with these letters, with her family's history." They decided to approach Amelia Beaumont the next morning, hoping to catch her before she left for the day. They spent the rest of the evening carefully organizing the letters, separating them into chronological order, creating a timeline of Eliza and Robert's relationship. As they worked, Lucas found himself drawn to the letters written by Robert. He read them with a growing sense of connection to his great-great-grandfather, recognizing a shared sensibility, a similar way of looking at the world. He saw the young man's passion, his love for Eliza, his unwavering belief in their future together, even in the face of war and adversity. He also saw the fear, the uncertainty, the creeping sense of despair that began to permeate Robert's letters as the war dragged on. He read of battles fought, of comrades lost, of the growing realization that the Confederate cause was doomed. In one letter, Robert wrote, "I fear, my dearest Eliza, that I may never see you again. But I carry your love with me, a shield against the darkness, a beacon of hope in this desolate landscape. If I should fall, know that my last thoughts will be of you." Lucas felt a lump in his throat, a wave of emotion that caught him by surprise. He had always been a detached observer, a chronicler of other people's lives, never allowing himself to become emotionally involved. But this was different. This was his family, his blood, his history. He looked up at Evelyn, who was watching him with a concerned expression. He realized he'd been silent for a long time, lost in Robert's words, in his own thoughts. "It's personal," he said, his voice rough. "Reading these letters, it's like getting to know him. My great-great-grandfather. A man I never knew, but who feels strangely familiar." Evelyn nodded understandingly. "History has a way of doing that, of connecting us to the past, to the people who came before us. It reminds us that we're all part of a larger story." He shared a few more passages with her, those that detailed Robert's growing disillusionment with the war and his secret meetings with Eliza, always beneath the lightning-scarred oak. Evelyn listened intently, her own knowledge of Charleston history filling in some of the blanks, adding context to Robert's words. As the evening drew to a close, Lucas found himself reflecting on his own life, on the choices he had made, the regrets he carried. He thought of the woman he had lost decades ago, the woman who had shared his passion for history, for stories. He had let her go, driven by his own ambition, his fear of commitment. He had convinced himself that he was better off alone, that relationships were nothing more than a distraction from his work. But now, reading Robert's letters, seeing the depth of his love for Eliza, Lucas realized how wrong he had been. He had sacrificed something precious, something irreplaceable, on the altar of his own cynicism. He looked at Evelyn, her silver hair gleaming in the lamplight, her eyes filled with a warmth and understanding that he hadn't encountered in years. He felt a stirring within him, a flicker of something he thought he had extinguished long ago. Hope. He realized that this quest, this journey into the past, was not just about uncovering Eliza and Robert's story, it was about uncovering his own. It was about confronting his own demons, his own regrets, and perhaps finding a way to heal. Before they left the attic, he picked up one of Robert's letters, a particularly poignant one, written just weeks before the soldier's death. He read a passage aloud, his voice trembling slightly. "If these words should reach you, my beloved Eliza, know that my love for you remains unbroken, eternal. And if, by some miracle, we are reunited in another life, I will find you. I will always find you." He looked at Evelyn, his eyes meeting hers. He saw a reflection of his own emotions in her gaze, a shared understanding of the enduring power of love, of the hope that transcends time and circumstance. He knew, with a certainty that surprised even himself, that this was not just the end of a long day's work. It was the beginning of something new, something unexpected, something that had the potential to change both of their lives forever. The confrontation with Amelia Beaumont awaited, but for now, Lucas was lost in the echoes of Hawthorne's past and the surprising possibilities of his own present. Chapter 7. A Mirror in Time. The morning dawned bright and clear, the Charleston sun already promising a sweltering day. Evelyn and Lucas arrived at Beaumont House early, hoping to catch Amelia before she left for her day, whatever mysterious other matters typically occupied her time. They found her in the dining room, a cavernous space filled with heavy, antique furniture and shrouded in a perpetual twilight. She was seated at a massive mahogany table, sipping coffee and staring out the window at the overgrown gardens. She looked up as they entered, her expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "Mr. Hawthorne, Miss Carter," she said, her voice cool. "What brings you here so early? I thought I made myself clear yesterday. This house is unavailable for further exploration." Lucas stepped forward, his demeanor calm but firm. "Miss Beaumont, we understand your position, but we've made some discoveries. Discoveries that we believe are directly related to your family history." Amelia raised a skeptical eyebrow. "My family history? I assure you, Mr. Hawthorne, there is nothing of interest in my family history. We were ordinary people, leading ordinary lives." Evelyn exchanged a look with Lucas. Amelia's insistence on the ordinariness of her family was becoming increasingly suspicious. It was as if she were deliberately trying to downplay their significance, to erase their past. "Miss Beaumont," Evelyn said gently, "we found letters. Love letters, written during the Civil War. Written by a woman named Eliza, to a soldier named Robert Hawthorne." Amelia's composure flickered, just for a moment. A flicker of recognition? Fear? It was gone so quickly that Evelyn almost doubted she'd seen it. And Lucas added, his voice even, "We believe Eliza was related to you. She mentions a cousin, Amelia, in her letters. An Amelia Beaumont." Amelia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "This is absurd," she said, her voice rising. "I don't know what you're talking about. I have no interest in these fanciful tales." Lucas held up the locket, the one containing Eliza's portrait. "This locket," he said, "belonged to Eliza, and it has the initials AB inscribed on it. Amelia Beaumont's initials." Amelia stared at the locket, her face paling. She reached out a trembling hand, as if to touch it, then quickly withdrew it. I don't know anything about that," she stammered. It must be a coincidence." But it wasn't a coincidence, and they all knew it. Amelia's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, revealing the cracks beneath. Evelyn decided to press further. "Miss Beaumont, we also found a newspaper clipping about a soldier killed in action. Captain Robert Hawthorne. He was Lucas's great-great-grandfather." Amelia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She stared at Lucas, her eyes wide with shock. The color had completely drained from her face. "Robert Hawthorne," she whispered, her voice barely audible.
"But how?"
Lucas stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Miss Beaumont, we know there's a connection. Between your family and mine. Between Eliza and Robert. We need to understand what happened. Why were the letters hidden? Why are you so determined to destroy this house?" Amelia looked from Lucas to Evelyn, her expression a mixture of fear and desperation. She seemed to be struggling with herself, battling an internal conflict that had clearly been raging for years. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. There's a story," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A family secret. Something that's been passed down through the generations. Something terrible." Evelyn and Lucas exchanged a look. They had broken through. Amelia was finally ready to talk. "It happened during the war," Amelia continued, her gaze fixed on the distant past. "Eliza and Robert, they were in love. But their families, they were on opposing sides. Not just politically, but personally. There was a feud. A bitter rivalry that had spanned decades. The letters," Lucas said, "they were hidden to protect them? From the families?" Amelia nodded. "Yes. But it was more than that. There was a betrayal. A secret that could have destroyed both families. A secret that has haunted us ever since." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Eliza, she wasn't just in love with Robert. She was carrying his child." Evelyn gasped. This was a new and devastating twist. A child. A child lost to history. A child whose existence had been erased. A child? Lucas echoed. "What happened?" "The child, a girl, born shortly after Robert's death. My great-grandmother always said the baby died shortly after. A sickly child." That's what she was told. Amelia's voice was flat. Evelyn and Lucas exchanged a stunned look. This changed everything. Amelia shook her head. "But looking at you, Mr. Hawthorne, the resemblance. I never truly bought that story. Not in my heart. It's like looking at a mirror in time, and now. All this, the letters, it's all coming back." She looked directly at Lucas, a glimmer of something akin to hope in her aged eyes. "We need to find out the truth. I need to know what really happened to Eliza's baby. And I think," she gestured vaguely at the house around them, "the answer is somewhere within these walls. Somewhere my ancestors hid it, along with their shame and their secrets." The mirror in time had shattered. The reflections were fragmented, distorted, but they were there. And Evelyn and Lucas, with Amelia's reluctant blessing, were now tasked with piecing them back together, to uncover a truth that had been buried for over a century, a truth that had the potential to not only rewrite history, but to reshape their own lives in ways they could not yet imagine. Chapter 8. The Developer's Threat. The revelation of Eliza's child and Amelia's sudden shift from obstructionist to co-conspirator had dramatically altered the landscape of their investigation. The stakes were higher, the mystery deeper, and the urgency more palpable. The past was no longer a distant echo, it was a living, breathing presence, demanding to be acknowledged. Amelia, though shaken by the unfolding truth, proved to be a surprisingly valuable resource. She provided them with access to the house's archives, a dusty, neglected room filled with old ledgers, family Bibles, and boxes of miscellaneous documents. "I've avoided this room for years," she admitted, her voice tinged with a hint of shame. "Too many ghosts. Too many reminders of what my family tried to forget." Evelyn and Lucas began to sift through the archives, their search now focused on finding any mention of Eliza's child, any clue that might shed light on the baby's fate. They worked tirelessly, their initial excitement tempered by the daunting task ahead. The sheer volume of material was overwhelming, and much of it was damaged or illegible. As they worked, Evelyn noticed a change in Lucas. He was more focused, more driven, his cynicism replaced by a quiet intensity. He seemed to be fueled by a personal connection to the story, a desire to uncover the truth about his ancestors' lost love and their child. He was particularly drawn to the family Bibles, meticulously examining the entries for births, deaths, and marriages. He discovered that Robert Hawthorne had indeed been married, briefly, to a woman named Sarah, before he met Eliza. The marriage had produced no children, and Sarah had died of illness shortly before Robert's enlistment in the Confederate Army. "This adds another layer to the story," Lucas said, his brow furrowed. Robert was a widower, not a carefree bachelor. He had already experienced loss, which makes his love for Eliza even more poignant. Evelyn, meanwhile, focused on the ledgers, hoping to find some financial record, some indication of a child being cared for or perhaps sent away. She discovered that the Beaumont family had been wealthy plantation owners, their fortune built on the backs of enslaved people. The ledgers detailed the transactions, the buying and selling of human beings, a stark reminder of the brutal reality of the era. She also found entries that hinted at financial difficulties in the years following the Civil War, a decline in the family's fortunes that mirrored the collapse of the Confederacy. This decline, she suspected, might have played a role in the events surrounding Eliza's child. As they delved deeper into the archives, they began to piece together a more complete picture of the Beaumont family, a family riddled with secrets, betrayals, and financial struggles. They discovered that Amelia's great-grandfather, the brother of Eliza's cousin Amelia, had been a ruthless businessman, deeply involved in the slave trade and fiercely opposed to the Union. He was also, they discovered, deeply in debt. This discovery led them to another box of documents containing correspondence between Amelia's great-grandfather and various creditors. The letters revealed a desperate attempt to stave off financial ruin, a willingness to do anything to maintain the family's wealth and status. One letter in particular caught their attention. It was written to a man named Silas Blackwood, a known associate of Amelia's great-grandfather and a notorious figure in Charleston society. The letter spoke of a delicate matter that needed to be handled discreetly and a sum of money that would be paid upon the successful completion of a certain task. This doesn't sound good, Evelyn said, her voice filled with apprehension. Silas Blackwood was an unsavory character, involved in all sorts of illegal activities. Lucas nodded grimly. This delicate matter, it could be anything. But given the context, given the family's financial troubles and the secret of Eliza's child, it's likely connected. Suddenly, a loud banging on the front door interrupted their work. Amelia, who had been quietly assisting them, jumped to her feet, her face pale. "That's him," she said, her voice trembling. "The developer. Mr. Thompson. He's been persistent. He wants to finalize the deal." Evelyn and Lucas exchanged a look. The developer. The man who wanted to demolish Beaumont House and erase its history. They had almost forgotten about him, lost in the labyrinth of the past. But now, he was here, a tangible threat to their investigation, to the very existence of the house and its secrets. Lucas stood up, his expression determined. "We need to stall him. We need more time." Amelia wrung her hands nervously. I don't know. He's very persuasive.
And he has a contract.
Evelyn stepped forward, her own resolve hardening. "Miss Beaumont, we're close. We're on the verge of uncovering the truth about your family, about Eliza and Robert and their child. We can't let him destroy this house, not now." Amelia hesitated, torn between her fear of the developer and her newfound desire to uncover the truth. Finally, she nodded, her expression resolute. "All right," she said. I'll try to stall him. But I can't promise anything." She went to answer the door, leaving Evelyn and Lucas alone in the archives. They listened anxiously as Amelia spoke to the developer, their voices muffled, but the tension palpable. "We need to find something concrete," Lucas said, his voice urgent. "Something that proves the historical significance of this house, something that will stop him from demolishing it." They returned to their work, their search now fueled by a desperate urgency. The developer's threat had added a new layer of pressure, a ticking clock that counted down to the potential destruction of everything they were working to uncover. The past and the present had collided, and the battle for Beaumont House and its secrets had begun. Chapter 9. Midnight in the Garden. The muffled voices from the entrance hall continued, Amelia's increasingly strained tones a counterpoint to the developer's, Mr. Thompson's, smooth, insistent baritone. Evelyn and Lucas, their nerves stretched taut, continued their frantic search of the archives. They knew they were running out of time. Lucas, driven by a growing sense of urgency, focused on the correspondence between Amelia's great-grandfather and Silas Blackwood. He was convinced that these letters held the key to understanding the delicate matter and, potentially, the fate of Eliza's child. Evelyn, meanwhile, returned to the family Bibles, meticulously examining the entries for any mention of a child, a birth, a death, anything that might shed light on the mystery. She felt a growing sense of frustration, a sense of being so close, yet so far from the truth. Suddenly, Lucas let out a sharp intake of breath. I think I've found something," he said, his voice hushed. Evelyn rushed to his side, her heart pounding with anticipation. He was holding a small, leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with a spidery, almost illegible script. "It's a journal," Lucas said, "belonging to Silas Blackwood. It seems to have been misfiled. Accidentally, or perhaps deliberately." He began to read aloud, his voice trembling slightly as he deciphered the cramped handwriting. The journal entries detailed Blackwood's various business dealings, his involvement in smuggling, gambling, and other illicit activities. Then, a particular entry caught their attention. Received instructions from Beaumont Ree, the infant. A delicate situation, indeed. The girl is a liability, a threat to his carefully constructed facade. Arrangements have been made. The child will be removed. Payment received upon completion, Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Removed?" she whispered. "What does that mean?" Lucas continued reading, his face paling with each word. The subsequent entries were vague, cryptic, but they hinted at a dark and sinister outcome. Blackwood wrote of a journey, a meeting with an unnamed woman, a transaction that left him feeling uneasy. The final entry related to the matter read, "The deed is done. The child is gone. Beaumont is satisfied. I hope I never have to do anything like that again." Lucas closed the journal, his hands trembling. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with a mixture of horror and grief. He killed her," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Beaumont had his own grandchild killed. To protect his reputation, his fortune. Evelyn felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The cruelty, the callousness of the act, was almost beyond comprehension. She thought of Eliza, of her love for Robert, of her hopes for their child. A life cut short, a future stolen, all for the sake of greed and social standing. Just then, Amelia returned to the archives, her face ashen. He's giving me until the end of the week," she said, her voice trembling. "He says if I don't sign the papers by then, he'll take legal action." Evelyn and Lucas exchanged a look. They had the truth, or at least a part of it. But it was a truth so dark, so devastating, that it might not be enough to save Beaumont House. "We have proof," Lucas said, holding up Blackwood's journal. "Proof that Amelia's great-grandfather was involved in a terrible crime. The murder of his own grandchild." Amelia stared at the journal, her eyes wide with shock. "Murder?" she whispered. My ancestor?" Evelyn nodded grimly. "We believe so. This journal, it details his involvement with Silas Blackwood and the removal of Eliza's child." Amelia sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice muffled. This is too much." Evelyn felt a surge of sympathy for the woman. She had inherited a legacy of secrets and lies, a burden that had weighed her down for years. Now, the truth was finally out, and it was more terrible than she could have imagined. But they couldn't give up. They had come too far, uncovered too much, to let the developer win. They had to find a way to use this information, to expose the truth and save Beaumont House. "We need to go public," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "We need to tell this story. To the Historical Society, to the newspapers, to anyone who will listen." Lucas nodded in agreement. "We need to make sure that Beaumont House is recognized as a site of historical significance, a place where a terrible injustice occurred, a place that deserves to be preserved, not demolished." But time was running out. They had only a few days to gather their evidence, build their case, and convince the public and the authorities that Beaumont House was worth saving. As darkness fell, Evelyn and Lucas found themselves drawn to the gardens, to the very spot where Eliza and Robert had shared their secret moments of love. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and magnolias, a bittersweet fragrance that spoke of both beauty and loss. They stood beneath the lightning-scarred oak tree, the same tree that had witnessed Eliza and Robert's clandestine meetings, the same tree that had guarded their buried letters. The moonlight cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn, creating an ethereal, almost otherworldly atmosphere. "It's haunting," Lucas said, his voice low. "Standing here, knowing what happened, knowing the pain, the loss that this place has witnessed." Evelyn nodded, her own emotions a turbulent mix of sadness and anger. She felt a deep connection to Eliza, to her unwavering love for Robert, to her tragic fate. "We have to do this," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We have to fight for them. For Eliza and Robert, for their child. For all those who were silenced, whose stories were erased." Lucas looked at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. He saw the strength in her gaze, the passion that burned within her. He realized that he was no longer just fighting for the past, he was fighting for the future, for a future where justice prevailed, where the truth was honored. He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently, a wordless moment that held more weight than a spoken oath. As they stood there, beneath the ancient oak, in the heart of the overgrown garden, they felt a sense of purpose, a sense of connection that transcended their individual lives. They were united in their quest, bound together by a shared commitment to uncovering the truth and ensuring that the whispers of Beaumont House, the echoes of a love lost and a life stolen, would finally be heard. Midnight in the garden had brought them not solace, but a renewed sense of urgency, a determination to fight for the memory of those who could no longer fight for themselves. Chapter 10. A Dance of Words. The urgency of their situation propelled Evelyn and Lucas into a whirlwind of activity. They knew they had to act quickly, strategically, and persuasively to counter the developer's imminent threat and save Beaumont House. Their plan was multifaceted: engage the Historical Society, garner public support through media exposure, and explore any legal avenues to delay or prevent the demolition. Their first step was to formally present their findings to the Charleston Historical Society. They meticulously prepared their presentation, organizing the letters, the newspaper clipping, Silas Blackwood's journal, and photographs of the locket and the oak tree. They crafted a narrative that was both historically accurate and emotionally compelling, highlighting the tragic love story of Eliza and Robert, the subsequent murder of their child, and the enduring significance of Beaumont House as a tangible link to that past. The meeting with the Historical Society was held in a stately room lined with portraits of Charleston's founding fathers, a setting that ironically mirrored the very history they were fighting to preserve. The board members, a mix of academics, philanthropists, and local dignitaries, listened intently as Evelyn and Lucas presented their case. Evelyn, with her deep knowledge of Charleston history and her passionate belief in the importance of preserving the past, spoke eloquently about the historical context of Eliza and Robert's story, the social and political forces that had shaped their lives and ultimately led to their tragic fate. Lucas, with his novelist's gift for storytelling, brought Eliza and Robert to life, reading excerpts from their letters, conveying the depth of their love, the pain of their separation, and the chilling reality of the crime that had been committed. He emphasized the human element of the story, the universal themes of love, loss, and betrayal that resonated across the centuries. The presentation had a profound impact on the board members. They were visibly moved by Eliza and Robert's story, horrified by the revelation of the child's murder, and impressed by the meticulous research that Evelyn and Lucas had conducted. The board's president, a distinguished historian named Dr. Alastair Davies, spoke after a moment of silence. "This is extraordinary," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've uncovered a hidden chapter of Charleston's history, a story that deserves to be told, a place that must be preserved." The board voted unanimously to support Evelyn and Lucas's efforts to save Beaumont House. They pledged to provide legal assistance, to lobby the city council, and to mobilize their network of contacts to raise awareness and garner public support. Their next step was to take their story to the media. They contacted a local journalist, a young, ambitious reporter named Sarah Chin, who had a reputation for investigative reporting and a passion for local history. Sarah was immediately intrigued by the story, recognizing its potential to capture the public's imagination and spark a citywide debate about the importance of preserving Charleston's heritage. Sarah Chin wrote a series of articles for the Charleston Chronicle detailing Evelyn and Lucas's discoveries, highlighting the tragic love story of Eliza and Robert, and exposing the developers' plans to demolish Beaumont House. The articles generated a huge public response. Letters poured into the newspaper, expressing outrage at the planned demolition, sympathy for Eliza and Robert, and support for Evelyn and Lucas's efforts. The stories spread like wildfire across social media, with people sharing the articles, posting comments, and organizing online petitions to save Beaumont House. The hashtag Save Beaumont House began trending, becoming a rallying cry for preservationists and history enthusiasts across the city and even beyond. Amidst this whirlwind of activity, Evelyn and Lucas found themselves working closely together, their days and nights consumed by the fight to save Beaumont House. They spent hours poring over documents, strategizing their next moves, and supporting each other through the emotional roller coaster of their investigation. Their initial awkwardness, the remnants of their skeptical first encounter, had completely vanished, replaced by a deep mutual respect and a growing sense of camaraderie. They had become a team, their individual strengths complementing each other, their shared purpose creating a bond that was both professional and personal. Evelyn admired Lucas's sharp intellect, his ability to see connections, to weave together disparate threads of information into a coherent narrative. She also appreciated his sensitivity, his empathy for the characters and their story, his willingness to confront his own emotional demons. Lucas, in turn, was impressed by Evelyn's vast knowledge of history, her meticulous research skills, and her unwavering determination. He also found himself drawn to her warmth, her kindness, her quiet strength. He saw in her a kindred spirit, someone who shared his passion for the past, someone who understood the power of stories to shape our lives. Their interactions were a dance of words, a constant exchange of ideas, insights, and emotions. They debated, they challenged, they supported, they inspired. They found themselves finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's thoughts, their minds working in perfect synchronicity. One evening, after a particularly long and exhausting day, they found themselves alone in the Beaumont House library, surrounded by the silent witnesses of history. They were reviewing Sarah Chen's latest article, a powerful piece that had generated even more public support for their cause. Lucas looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with admiration. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "you're amazing. You've brought this story to life. You've given Eliza and Robert a voice." Evelyn smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "We did it together," she said. "We're a team." He nodded, his gaze lingering on hers. "A pretty good team, I'd say." He reached out and gently touched her hand, a fleeting gesture that sent a shiver of warmth through her. She looked at him, her heart beating faster. She saw in his eyes a reflection of her own emotions, a shared sense of connection, of something deeper, something that was beginning to blossom amidst the dust and echoes of Beaumont House. The dance of words had become something more, a subtle, unspoken dance of hearts. And both of them knew that this fight, this shared passion, was weaving a new story, a story of their own. Chapter 11. The owner's dismissal. Despite the growing public support and the Historical Society's backing, Evelyn and Lucas faced a formidable obstacle, Amelia Beaumont's contractual agreement with the developer, Mr. Thompson. While Amelia had emotionally aligned herself with their cause, the legal document she had signed remained a significant threat. Mr. Thompson, sensing the shifting tide, intensified his pressure on Amelia. He was a man accustomed to getting his way, and he wasn't about to let a sentimental old house and a couple of meddling historians derail his lucrative development plans. He scheduled a meeting with Amelia, ostensibly to finalize the sale, but in reality, to intimidate her into submission. Evelyn and Lucas, anticipating Thompson's move, decided to accompany Amelia to the meeting. They knew they couldn't legally interfere with a contract, but they could provide moral support and, hopefully, dissuade Thompson from pursuing his aggressive tactics. The meeting took place in Thompson's lavish office, a stark contrast to the faded grandeur of Beaumont House. The office was a testament to modern wealth and power, with sleek glass walls, designer furniture, and panoramic views of the city skyline. Thompson himself was a picture of polished arrogance, his expensive suit, perfectly coiffed hair, and condescending smile radiating a sense of entitlement. "Amelia, my dear," Thompson began, his voice dripping with false charm, "I'm so glad we could finally meet to finalize the details. I'm sure you're eager to be rid of that burden of a house." Amelia, sitting stiffly in her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, managed a weak smile. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I've been doing some rethinking." Thompson's smile vanished, replaced by a look of annoyance. "Rethinking?" he repeated, his voice sharp. "Amelia, we have a contract. A legally binding agreement." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "we understand that you have a contract with Miss Beaumont, but we believe there are extenuating circumstances that you should be aware of." Lucas added, "We've uncovered evidence that Beaumont House is a site of significant historical importance. Evidence that could potentially lead to its designation as a protected landmark." Thompson scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "Historical importance? That old house is nothing but a pile of rotting wood and crumbling bricks. It's an eyesore, a relic of a bygone era." Evelyn presented Thompson with a copy of Sarah Chen's articles, highlighting the public outcry over the planned demolition and the Historical Society's support for their efforts. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "this is not just about a house. It's about a story of love, loss, and injustice. A story that resonates with the people of Charleston." Thompson glanced at the articles, his expression unimpressed. "Sentimentality," he sneered. "The public is fickle, their opinions easily swayed. This outcry will die down, and I will have my hotel." Lucas stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "we also have evidence of a crime. A murder. Committed on the grounds of Beaumont House by Amelia's great-grandfather, involving a man named Silas Blackwood." He handed Thompson a copy of Blackwood's journal entry, the one detailing the removal of Eliza's child. Thompson read the entry, his face paling slightly. He looked at Amelia, then back at Lucas, his expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. This is ridiculous," he stammered. "This is ancient history. It has nothing to do with me, or with my development plans." Evelyn pressed further. "Mr. Thompson, we believe that the truth about this crime and the location of the child's remains may still be on the property. We're requesting that you allow us to conduct a thorough archaeological investigation before any demolition takes place." Thompson slammed his fist on the table, his face contorted with rage. "Absolutely not," he shouted. "This is outrageous. You're trying to sabotage my project, to blackmail me with this fabricated story." He turned to Amelia, his voice dripping with venom. "Amelia, you signed a contract. You agreed to sell me this property, without any conditions. If you back out now, I will sue you. I will ruin you financially. You will be left with nothing." Amelia, visibly shaken by Thompson's outburst, looked at Evelyn and Lucas, her eyes filled with fear and desperation. She was caught between a rock and a hard place, trapped by her past mistakes and threatened by a powerful, ruthless man. Evelyn stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Amelia's arm. "Miss Beaumont," she said softly, "you don't have to do this. You have the right to change your mind. We'll support you, no matter what you decide." Lucas added, "We'll fight him, Amelia. We'll fight him with everything we've got. He can't win. Not if we stand together." The meeting ended in a stalemate. Thompson, furious and frustrated, stormed out of the office, leaving Amelia, Evelyn, and Lucas to grapple with the consequences of his threats. The owner's dismissal of their claims, fueled by his greed and arrogance, had only strengthened their resolve. The battle for Beaumont House was far from over, and they were prepared to fight it to the bitter end. The legal battle loomed, but so did the potential for a deeper, more impactful revelation, one that might shift the balance of power in their favor. Chapter 12. Lost in Translation. The aftermath of the confrontational meeting with Thompson left a heavy cloud of uncertainty hanging over them. While Amelia was emotionally swayed by Evelyn and Lucas's discoveries, the legal and financial pressures exerted by Thompson were undeniable. They needed a breakthrough, something concrete that could either invalidate the contract or force Thompson to reconsider his plans. Evelyn, with her legal background, a detail only briefly touched upon earlier, but now brought to the forefront, suggested they scrutinize the original contract between Amelia and Thompson. She reasoned that there might be loopholes, overlooked clauses, or ambiguities that could be exploited to their advantage. They returned to Beaumont House, the looming threat of demolition casting a long shadow over their efforts. They gathered in the library, the very room where so much of the story had unfolded, and spread out the contract on the large mahogany table. The contract was a dense, complex document, filled with legal jargon and technical terms. Evelyn, with her experience in deciphering such documents, took the lead, meticulously reading each clause, searching for any weakness, any ambiguity, any point of leverage. Lucas, meanwhile, focused on researching Thompson's past dealings, hoping to find evidence of unethical or illegal behavior that could be used to discredit him or pressure him into backing down. He scoured online databases, news archives, and public records, looking for any dirt on the developer. Amelia, though still shaken by Thompson's threats, assisted them as best she could, providing insights into the negotiations and her interactions with the developer. She revealed that Thompson had been unusually aggressive from the start, pressuring her to sign the contract quickly, offering her a price that was significantly below market value, and glossing over certain details about the property. As Evelyn delved deeper into the contract, she noticed something peculiar. There was a clause, buried deep within the document, that referred to pre-existing encumbrances on the property. The clause stated that the seller, Amelia, was responsible for disclosing any such encumbrances to the buyer, Thompson, and that failure to do so could result in the contract being voided. "This is interesting," Evelyn said, her voice filled with a flicker of hope. "This pre-existing encumbrances clause, it could be our way out." Lucas looked up from his research, his interest piqued. "What does it mean? What kind of encumbrances are we talking about?" Evelyn explained that encumbrances could refer to a variety of things: liens, easements, historical designations, or any other legal claim or restriction on the property. "If," she said, "we can prove that there's a pre-existing encumbrance on Beaumont House that Amelia wasn't aware of and that Thompson wasn't informed of, we might be able to invalidate the contract." The question was, what kind of encumbrance could they find? They had already established the historical significance of the house, but that, in itself, wasn't necessarily a legal encumbrance. They needed something more concrete, something legally binding. Suddenly, Evelyn remembered something. A detail from one of Eliza's letters, a reference to a family burial ground on the property. "We met, as always, beneath the oak tree, near the small plot where my ancestors are laid to rest. It is a sacred place, a place of peace and remembrance." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. A family burial ground. If they could prove that there was a burial ground on the property and that it was legally protected, that could be the encumbrance they needed. "The letters," she said, her voice filled with excitement. Eliza mentioned a family burial ground near the oak tree. Lucas and Amelia exchanged a look of surprise. They had both read the letters, but they hadn't grasped the significance of that particular detail. "A burial ground?" Amelia said. I don't know anything about that. I've never seen any graves on the property." Evelyn explained that the burial ground might be unmarked, overgrown, or even forgotten. But if it existed, and if it was legally registered, it could be their salvation. They immediately launched a search for any records related to a burial ground on the Beaumont House property. They returned to the house's archives, poring over old maps, deeds, and property records. They also contacted the local historical society and the city's records office, requesting any information they might have. The search was painstaking, frustrating, and time-consuming. They spent hours sifting through dusty documents, deciphering illegible handwriting, and chasing down dead ends. The clock was ticking, and Thompson's deadline loomed ever closer. Just when they were about to give up hope, Lucas discovered something. A small, hand-drawn map, tucked away in a box of miscellaneous papers. The map depicted the Beaumont house property, and it clearly showed a small, rectangular area marked family burial ground, located near the oak tree, just as Eliza had described. He held up the map triumphantly. "I've found something." The map was old, faded, and partially damaged, but the location of the burial ground was unmistakable. They now had visual proof, a tangible piece of evidence to support their claim. But this was just part of the battle. They still needed legal documentation, something that could prove the cemetery was not just an idea or a personal burial ground, but one protected, even if forgotten, by some kind of legal statute. As they examined the map more closely, Evelyn recognized a small inscription, written in a faint, almost illegible script, near the burial plot. She grabbed a magnifying glass and carefully studied the inscription. She realized with a jolt, it was a reference. A very old state statute reference. One that detailed preservation rules for historic burial plots. They had it. Lost in the translation of time, the old map, and Eliza's words, was the proof they needed. It wasn't just a burial ground, it was a legally protected burial ground, a pre-existing encumbrance that Amelia had not disclosed to Thompson because she hadn't known about it, and that, they hoped, was enough to break the contract and finally save Beaumont House. Chapter 13. A Glimmer of Hope. The discovery of the map and the statute reference was a turning point, a glimmer of hope in their increasingly desperate fight to save Beaumont House. They had a potential legal weapon, a means to challenge Thompson's contract and, perhaps, prevent the demolition. But they knew they couldn't afford to celebrate yet. They still needed to verify the statute, confirm that it was still in effect, and determine whether it applied to the specific circumstances of the Beaumont House burial ground. They also needed to prepare for a legal battle, anticipating that Thompson would not give up without a fight. Evelyn, with her legal background, took the lead in researching the statute. She contacted the state archives, the Historical Society's legal team, and several experts in property law, seeking their assistance in interpreting the statute and assessing its applicability to their case. Lucas, meanwhile, focused on gathering further evidence to support their claim. He revisited the area near the oak tree, searching for any physical evidence of the burial ground. He carefully examined the ground, looking for any signs of disturbed earth, any remnants of tombstones or markers, anything that might indicate the presence of graves. Amelia, energized by this new development, assisted them as best she could, providing additional information about the property's history and her family's traditions. She revealed that she had heard vague stories about a family burial ground, but she had always dismissed them as folklore, never believing they were true. The research process was slow and painstaking, but gradually they began to build a solid case. Evelyn discovered that the statute, though old, was still in effect. It provided strong protections for historic burial grounds, requiring that they be preserved and protected from disturbance or development. Lucas, after several days of searching, found physical evidence of the burial ground. He discovered several small, moss-covered stones, partially buried beneath the soil, arranged in a rectangular pattern that corresponded to the area marked on the map. He also found fragments of what appeared to be a broken tombstone, bearing the faint inscription of a name and a date, Eliza Beaumont, 1840–1864. The discovery of Eliza's tombstone was a powerful and emotional moment. It confirmed, beyond any doubt, that the burial ground was real, and that it contained the remains of the woman whose story had brought them all together. It was a tangible link to the past, a reminder of the human cost of the secrets and lies that had shrouded Beaumont House for so long. With the legal research and the physical evidence in hand, they were ready to confront Thompson again. They contacted his lawyer and requested a meeting, informing them that they had uncovered new information that could potentially invalidate the contract. The meeting took place in the same sterile, intimidating office as before. Thompson, however, seemed less confident, less arrogant than he had been previously. He was clearly aware of the growing public opposition to his project, and he was likely concerned about the potential legal challenges. Evelyn presented their findings, laying out the evidence in a clear, concise, and legally sound manner. She explained the pre-existing encumbrances clause in the contract, the discovery of the map and the statute reference, and the physical evidence of the burial ground. She concluded by stating that Amelia had unknowingly failed to disclose the existence of the legally protected burial ground, and that, as a result, the contract was potentially voidable. Thompson's lawyer, a sharp, experienced attorney named Ms. Davies, no relation to the Historical Society's Dr. Davies, listened carefully, her expression unreadable. She examined the documents, questioned Evelyn and Lucas about their findings, and then conferred with Thompson in hushed tones. After a lengthy and tense discussion, Ms. Davies addressed Evelyn and Lucas. "We acknowledge the new information," she said, her voice cautious. "However, we dispute your interpretation of the statute and its applicability to this specific situation. We maintain that the contract is valid and binding." She proposed a compromise. Thompson would agree to a limited archaeological investigation of the area near the oak tree, and if significant remains were found, he would consider adjusting his development plans to accommodate the burial ground. Evelyn and Lucas were wary of the offer. It was a far cry from what they wanted, which was the complete preservation of Beaumont House and its grounds. They suspected that Thompson was simply trying to buy time, to delay the project while he explored other options. They conferred with Amelia, who was adamant that she wanted to protect the burial ground and the memory of Eliza and her child. She was no longer afraid of Thompson or of the financial consequences of breaking the contract. She was determined to do what was right. Evelyn and Lucas, after careful consideration, rejected Thompson's offer. They informed Ms. Davies that they were prepared to take the matter to court, to fight for the full protection of the burial ground and the preservation of Beaumont House. The meeting ended in another stalemate, but this time, the mood was different. Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia left the office feeling a sense of cautious optimism, a glimmer of hope that they might actually win this battle. They had a strong case, a growing public support, and a renewed determination to see justice done. The legal battle loomed, but they were ready. They had found a chink in Thompson's armor, a glimmer of hope that had illuminated their path forward, and they were not about to let it fade. Chapter 14. The Hidden Diary. With the legal battle looming, Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia knew they needed to strengthen their case further. While the map, the statute, and the fragments of Eliza's tombstone were compelling evidence, they sought something more definitive, something that would irrefutably link the burial ground to the Beaumont family and establish its historical significance beyond any reasonable doubt. Evelyn suggested they conduct a more thorough search of the Beaumont House archives. She reasoned that if the map had been hidden away for so long, there might be other documents, other records, that had been overlooked or forgotten. They returned to the dusty, neglected archive room, their renewed determination fueled by the impending legal confrontation. They systematically went through every box, every drawer, every shelf, examining each document with meticulous care. Amelia, with her newfound understanding of her family's history, proved to be an invaluable asset. She was able to identify certain items, decipher cryptic notes, and provide context that helped them interpret the fragmented records. As they worked, Lucas stumbled upon a small, locked wooden box tucked away in a dark corner of the room. The box was old, its wood scratched and faded, its metal lock rusted and corroded. It looked as if it hadn't been opened in decades. "What's this?" he asked, holding up the box. Amelia examined the box, her brow furrowed in concentration. I don't recognize it," she said. "I've never seen it before." They tried to open the lock, but it was jammed shut. After several attempts, Lucas, with a bit of force, managed to pry it open. The wood splintered, the lock broke, and the lid creaked open, revealing the contents within. Inside the box, they found a single item, a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. The cover was blank, but as Lucas carefully opened the book, he saw an inscription on the first page, written in a delicate, flowing hand. "My private thoughts and reflections, Amelia Beaumont." 1860. Evelyn and Lucas exchanged a look of excitement. This was it. The diary of Eliza's cousin, the Amelia Beaumont who had known about Eliza and Robert's secret love, the Amelia Beaumont who had, presumably, hidden their letters. They gathered around a table, their hearts pounding with anticipation, as Lucas began to read aloud. The diary entries detailed the daily life of a young woman in Charleston society, her thoughts on family, friends, social events, and the growing tensions between the North and the South. As Lucas continued reading, the entries began to reveal a more intimate and personal side of Amelia. She wrote of her own romantic interests, her dreams, her fears, and her growing disillusionment with the societal constraints placed upon women. Then, the entries started to mention Eliza. Eliza is troubled. She is keeping a secret that is causing her great distress. I suspect it has something to do with a man Eliza has confided in me. She is in love, deeply in love, with a man named Robert Hawthorne, a Yankee soldier. It is a forbidden love, a dangerous love, but she cannot deny her heart. The diary entries provided a vivid and compelling account of Eliza and Robert's relationship, confirming the details they had already gleaned from the letters. Amelia wrote of their secret meetings, their unwavering devotion to each other, and the growing fear that their love would be discovered. Then, the entries took a darker turn. Robert has been killed in battle. Eliza is devastated. She is inconsolable. And she is carrying his child. Eliza's family is furious. They have disowned her. They have forbidden her from mentioning Robert's name or the child's. They are determined to erase all trace of their disgrace. Eliza has given birth to a daughter. A beautiful, healthy baby girl. But her family, they have taken the child away. They say they have sent her to a distant relative. But I fear something more terrible has happened. The subsequent entries were filled with Amelia's growing suspicion and guilt. She wrote of her attempts to find out what had happened to the child, her confrontations with her brother Amelia's great-grandfather, and her growing fear that he had been involved in something truly horrific. The final entry in the diary was particularly poignant. I have failed Eliza. I have failed her child. I have allowed my family's secrets, their lies, to prevail. I can only hope that, someday, the truth will be revealed, and justice will be done. I pray that this diary, this record of my shame, will one day find its way into the right hands. Lucas closed the diary, his hands trembling. The room was silent, the weight of Amelia's words hanging heavy in the air. They had found it, the definitive proof, the irrefutable evidence they needed. The diary not only confirmed the existence of the burial ground and its historical significance, but it also provided a first-hand account of the crime that had been committed, the murder of Eliza's child. Evelyn looked at Amelia, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and compassion. Your ancestor, she said softly, she wasn't a villain. She was a victim, too. A victim of her family's secrets, their lies, their cruelty. Amelia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, she said, her voice choked with emotion. I've carried this burden for so long, this sense of unease, of something terribly wrong. Now I finally understand. The hidden diary was more than just a historical document. It was a confession, a plea for forgiveness, a testament to the enduring power of truth. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the evidence that would, they hoped, finally save Beaumont House and bring justice to Eliza, Robert, and their lost child. The glimmer of hope had become a beacon, illuminating the path towards resolution and redemption. Chapter 15. A Kiss Under the Oaks. Armed with Amelia's diary, Evelyn and Lucas felt a surge of confidence. The diary was a powerful weapon, a first-hand account that not only corroborated their previous findings, but also added a layer of emotional depth and historical context that was undeniable. They immediately contacted their legal team, sharing the diary's contents and strategizing their next move. The lawyers were ecstatic. The diary, they confirmed, was a game-changer. It provided irrefutable evidence of the burial ground's historical significance and, more importantly, it directly implicated Amelia's great-grandfather in the murder of Eliza's child. They decided to use the diary as the centerpiece of their legal argument, presenting it to the court as evidence of a pre-existing encumbrance on the Beaumont House property, an encumbrance that Thompson had not been informed of, thus voiding the contract. They also decided to share the diary's contents with Sarah Chin, the journalist who had been covering their story. They knew that public opinion was a powerful force, and they wanted to keep the pressure on Thompson. Sarah Chin was stunned by the diary's revelations. She wrote a front-page article for the Charleston Chronicle detailing Amelia's account of Eliza and Robert's love story, the birth of their child, and the subsequent murder. The article caused a sensation, generating even more public outrage and support for Evelyn and Lucas's efforts. The hashtag Save Beaumont House exploded on social media, with people from all over the world expressing their solidarity and calling for justice for Eliza and her child. Donations poured into the Historical Society, providing them with the financial resources to continue the legal battle. Thompson, meanwhile, found himself increasingly isolated. His development project was now mired in controversy, his reputation tarnished by accusations of historical insensitivity and potential complicity in covering up a crime. His investors began to withdraw their support, and his political allies distanced themselves from him. Amidst this whirlwind of legal maneuvering and public pressure, Evelyn and Lucas found themselves drawn closer together. They had been through so much, shared so many intense moments, that their initial professional relationship had blossomed into something deeper, something more personal. They had spent countless hours working side by side, poring over documents, strategizing their next moves, and supporting each other through the emotional roller coaster of their investigation. They had discovered a shared passion for history, a shared commitment to justice, and a shared sense of purpose that had forged a powerful bond between them. They had also discovered a shared vulnerability, a willingness to open up about their own pasts, their own regrets, their own hopes for the future. Lucas had confided in Evelyn about his lost love, his years of self-imposed isolation, and his growing realization that he had made a mistake in letting her go. Evelyn, in turn, had shared her own feelings of loneliness, her doubts about her ability to make a difference after retirement, and her growing sense of reawakening, of finding a new purpose in this unexpected journey. One evening, after a particularly long and exhausting day, they found themselves alone in the Beaumont House gardens. They had just received word that the court had granted a temporary injunction, halting the demolition of Beaumont House pending a full hearing on the matter. They were standing beneath the ancient, lightning-scarred oak tree, the same tree that had witnessed Eliza and Robert's secret meetings, the same tree that now stood as a silent guardian of their memory. The air was warm and humid, heavy with the scent of jasmine and magnolias. The moonlight cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn, creating an atmosphere of quiet intimacy. Lucas looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with a tenderness that she had never seen before. "We did it," he said, his voice soft. "We saved Beaumont House. At least for now." Evelyn smiled, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude.
"We did it together," she said.
"We're a good team, you and I." He nodded, his gaze lingering on hers. "More than a team, I think." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the delicate curve of her face. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing involuntarily. She felt a warmth spread through her, a sense of comfort, of belonging, that she hadn't experienced in years. He leaned in closer, his breath warm on her skin. She tilted her head, her lips parting slightly in anticipation. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers, as if seeking permission, or perhaps reassurance. She met his gaze, her own eyes conveying her unspoken feelings, her trust, her affection, her growing love for this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and changed it so profoundly. He lowered his head and gently kissed her, his lips soft and tender against hers. It was a kiss of gratitude, of shared accomplishment, of mutual respect, and of a love that had blossomed amidst the dust and echoes of a long-forgotten past. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, a kiss that acknowledged the unspoken feelings that had been growing between them, a kiss that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. A kiss under the oaks, a place of history, of secrets, of love lost and found. The past had brought them together, and now, it seemed, the future was theirs to write. Chapter 16. Betrayal and Doubt. The kiss under the oaks marked a turning point in Evelyn and Lucas's relationship, a shift from professional colleagues and newfound friends to something deeper and more intimate. However, the joy of their budding romance was soon overshadowed by a new and unexpected challenge. The temporary injunction against the demolition of Beaumont House was a victory, but it was only temporary. The court had scheduled a full hearing to determine the validity of Evelyn and Lucas's claims regarding the historical significance of the burial ground and the pre-existing encumbrance on the property. Thompson, despite his setbacks, was not about to give up. He and his legal team launched a counteroffensive, challenging the authenticity of Amelia's diary and questioning the credibility of Evelyn and Lucas's research. They argued that the diary was a forgery, a fabrication created to derail Thompson's development project. They also presented their own expert witness, a historian named Dr. Samuel Harding, who testified that the burial ground was not historically significant, that it was likely nothing more than a small, private family plot with no legal protection. This counteroffensive created a wave of doubt and uncertainty. The media, which had previously been overwhelmingly supportive of Evelyn and Lucas, began to question their findings. Some articles raised concerns about the authenticity of the diary, and others questioned whether Evelyn and Lucas had allowed their personal feelings to cloud their judgment. The public, too, began to waver. The hashtag Save Beaumont House was still trending, but it was now accompanied by a counter hashtag, Beaumont Hoax, questioning the veracity of Evelyn and Lucas's claims. This shift in public opinion and the legal challenges put immense pressure on Evelyn and Lucas. They found themselves under intense scrutiny, their every move dissected and analyzed, their motives questioned. Even Amelia, who had been so supportive, began to have doubts. She was overwhelmed by the complexity of the legal battle, the conflicting expert opinions, and the relentless pressure from Thompson and his team. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Amelia confronted Evelyn and Lucas. She was visibly distraught, her hands trembling, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Dr. Harding, he seemed so certain. And the diary, could it be a fake?" Evelyn tried to reassure her. "Amelia," she said softly, "we believe the diary is genuine. We've had it authenticated by multiple experts. And the physical evidence of the burial ground, it's undeniable." Lucas added, "Dr. Harding is a paid witness, Amelia. He's being paid by Thompson to discredit us. His testimony is biased and unreliable." But Amelia was inconsolable. "I just don't know," she repeated. "I'm so confused, so overwhelmed. I trusted you. I believed you. But now I'm starting to wonder if I made a mistake." Her words were like a dagger to Evelyn's heart. She had poured her heart and soul into this investigation. She had risked her reputation, her career, to uncover the truth and save Beaumont House. And now, the very person she was trying to help, the person whose family history she was trying to protect, was doubting her. Lucas, too, was deeply affected by Amelia's doubts. He had developed a strong bond with Amelia. He had seen her transformation from a reluctant participant to a passionate advocate for her family's history. To have her question his integrity, his motives, was a crushing blow. The doubt and uncertainty spread like a virus, infecting their relationship. Evelyn and Lucas, who had been so close, so united in their purpose, began to drift apart. They started to question each other, to second-guess their decisions, to wonder if they had, indeed, allowed their personal feelings to cloud their judgment. Their once easy communication became strained, their conversations filled with tension and unspoken accusations. The joy they had found in each other's company was replaced by a sense of unease, of mistrust. One night, after a particularly heated argument, Lucas stormed out of the Beaumont House library, leaving Evelyn alone and heartbroken. She sat there, surrounded by the silent witnesses of history, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. She began to question herself, to wonder if she had been wrong all along. Had she been blinded by her passion for history, by her desire to make a difference, by her growing feelings for Lucas? Had she allowed her emotions to override her reason, her judgment? The doubt gnawed at her, undermining her confidence, her resolve. She felt lost, adrift, unsure of what to believe, who to trust. The betrayal of Amelia's doubt, coupled with the growing public skepticism and the legal challenges, had created a perfect storm of uncertainty, threatening to destroy everything she had worked for, everything she believed in. And most painfully, it was threatening to destroy the fragile, nascent love she had found with Lucas. Chapter 17. Unveiling the Truth. The rift between Evelyn and Lucas, fueled by Amelia's doubts and the mounting external pressures, deepened. They continued to work on the case, preparing for the upcoming court hearing, but their interactions were strained, their communication minimal. The joy and camaraderie they had once shared were replaced by a heavy silence, a palpable sense of mistrust. Evelyn, despite her own inner turmoil and self-doubt, refused to give up. She knew, deep down, that they were on the right track, that the diary was genuine, that the burial ground was historically significant. She was determined to prove it, not just to save Beaumont House, but to restore her credibility, to salvage her relationship with Lucas, and to honor the memory of Eliza and her child. She decided to focus on the diary itself. She reasoned that if she could find irrefutable proof of its authenticity, she could dispel Amelia's doubts and counter Thompson's accusations. She contacted several experts in forensic document analysis, handwriting analysis, and historical paper and ink analysis, asking them to examine the diary and provide their professional opinions. The experts conducted a thorough and meticulous examination of the diary, using a variety of scientific techniques to analyze the paper, the ink, the handwriting, and the binding. They compared the diary to other known documents from the same period, analyzing the language, the style, and the historical references. Meanwhile, Lucas, despite his own doubts and his hurt feelings, continued to investigate Thompson's background. He was convinced that the developer was hiding something, that he had a motive for wanting to discredit them beyond simply acquiring the Beaumont House property. He delved deeper into Thompson's past dealings, scouring public records, news archives, and online databases. He discovered that Thompson had a history of questionable business practices, including allegations of bribery, fraud, and environmental violations. He also found evidence that Thompson was heavily in debt and that the Beaumont House development was his last chance to avoid financial ruin. One evening, as Evelyn was waiting for the results of the forensic analysis, she received a call from one of the experts, a renowned handwriting analyst named Dr. Emily Carter, no relation. "Miss Carter," Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with excitement, "I have some remarkable news. The handwriting in the diary, it's a perfect match. A perfect match to another document we've analyzed." "What document?" Evelyn asked, her heart pounding with anticipation. "A letter," Dr. Carter replied. "A letter written by Amelia Beaumont, the elder, to her brother, in 1865. The letter is part of a collection held by the Charleston Historical Society." Evelyn was stunned. This was it. The irrefutable proof she had been searching for. The handwriting analysis confirmed, beyond any doubt, that the diary was genuine, that it had been written by Eliza's cousin, Amelia Beaumont. She immediately contacted Lucas, her voice trembling with excitement. "Lucas," she said, "we have it. We have proof. The diary is genuine. The handwriting matches a letter written by Amelia Beaumont, held by the Historical Society." Lucas was initially skeptical, his doubts lingering. But as Evelyn explained the details of the forensic analysis, his skepticism began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of relief and renewed hope. They arranged a meeting with Amelia, Dr. Carter, and the legal team to present the findings. Amelia, who had been increasingly withdrawn and distant, was initially reluctant to attend. But Evelyn, with gentle persistence, convinced her to come. Dr. Carter presented her findings, explaining the meticulous process she had used to analyze the handwriting and compare it to the letter held by the Historical Society. She showed them enlarged images of the handwriting samples, highlighting the specific characteristics that matched perfectly. Amelia listened intently, her expression shifting from doubt to disbelief to a dawning realization. She looked at the diary, then at the letter, then back at the diary. Tears welled up in her eyes. It's real," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "The diary, it's really hers. My ancestors." Evelyn placed a comforting hand on Amelia's arm. "Yes, Amelia," she said softly. "It's real. And it tells a story that needs to be heard." The forensic evidence, coupled with Amelia's renewed belief, was a turning point. The doubts and uncertainties that had plagued them began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of confidence and determination. Lucas, finally convinced of the diary's authenticity, apologized to Evelyn for his doubts, for his lack of trust. He admitted that he had allowed his own past experiences, his own insecurities, to cloud his judgment. Evelyn accepted his apology, her own hurt feelings beginning to heal. She understood his doubts. She had experienced them herself. But now, they were united again, their bond strengthened by the shared ordeal they had endured. With the diary's authenticity confirmed, and with Amelia firmly back on their side, they were ready to face Thompson and his legal team in court. The truth had been unveiled, and they were confident that justice would prevail. The unveiling of the truth was not just about the diary, it was about the unveiling of their own strengths, their vulnerabilities, and the enduring power of their partnership, both professional and personal. Chapter 18. Race Against Time. The court hearing was set for the following week, giving Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia a limited time to prepare their final arguments and gather any additional supporting evidence. The forensic authentication of the diary was a major victory, but they knew Thompson's legal team would still try to discredit them and challenge the historical significance of the burial ground. They worked tirelessly, driven by a sense of urgency and a shared determination to win. Evelyn focused on refining the legal arguments, ensuring that they were airtight and supported by irrefutable evidence. Lucas, leveraging his investigative skills, continued to dig into Thompson's background, hoping to find additional leverage that could be used against him. Amelia, now fully committed to their cause, provided invaluable assistance, sharing her knowledge of the Beaumont family history and helping them interpret the fragmented records. As they worked, Lucas stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. He discovered that Thompson had not only failed to disclose the potential existence of the burial ground to his investors, but he had also actively concealed it. He found emails and internal memos that showed Thompson had been aware of rumors about a family burial ground on the property, but he had dismissed them as unfounded and instructed his staff to keep the information confidential. This was a significant discovery. It showed that Thompson had acted in bad faith, deliberately concealing information that could have jeopardized his development project. It also provided a strong legal argument for voiding the contract, as Thompson had breached his duty of disclosure. They immediately shared this information with their legal team, who were ecstatic. This new evidence, coupled with the authenticated diary and the physical evidence of the burial ground, gave them a virtually unassailable case. Meanwhile, Sarah Chun, the journalist, continued to report on the case, keeping the public informed of the developments and maintaining the pressure on Thompson. Her articles, now reaching a national audience, generated a groundswell of support for Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia, and a corresponding wave of condemnation against Thompson and his development project. As the court hearing approached, Evelyn and Lucas found themselves working around the clock, fueled by adrenaline and a sense of impending climax. They knew that this hearing was not just about saving Beaumont House, it was about preserving history, honoring the memory of Eliza and her child, and upholding the principles of justice and truth. Their personal relationship, which had been strained by doubt and mistrust, was now stronger than ever. They had weathered the storm, their bond deepened by the shared ordeal they had endured. They had learned to trust each other, to rely on each other, and to support each other through the most challenging of circumstances. The night before the hearing, they found themselves alone in the Beaumont House library, surrounded by the silent witnesses of history. They were reviewing their final arguments, making sure that every detail was perfect, every point irrefutable. Lucas looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with admiration and affection. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice soft. Evelyn smiled, her heart filled with gratitude. "We have," she said. "And we couldn't have done it without each other." He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "I'm glad I went through this with you." She squeezed his hand, her own eyes conveying her unspoken feelings. "Me too, Lucas," she said. "Me too." They spent the rest of the evening working, their shared purpose and their renewed connection giving them the strength and determination they needed to face the final challenge. It was a race against time, not just against the clock ticking down to the court hearing, but a race against the forces of greed and historical obliteration. They were ready. They had the truth on their side, and they were prepared to fight for it with every ounce of their being. Chapter 19. The Forgotten Ball. The day of the court hearing arrived, filled with a palpable tension that hung heavy in the air. Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia, accompanied by their legal team, entered the courtroom, their faces determined, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The courtroom was packed, filled with journalists, supporters, curious onlookers, and representatives from the Historical Society. The media attention surrounding the case had been intense, and the public interest was at an all-time high. Thompson and his legal team were already seated at their table, their expressions confident, almost smug. Thompson, dressed in an expensive suit, exuded an air of arrogance, seemingly unfazed by the overwhelming public support for Evelyn and Lucas. The hearing began with opening statements from both sides. Evelyn and Lucas's lead attorney, a seasoned litigator named Mr. Harrison, presented their case with eloquence and passion, outlining the historical significance of Beaumont House, the evidence of the burial ground, the authenticity of Amelia's diary, and Thompson's deliberate concealment of crucial information. Thompson's attorney, Ms. Davies, countered with a vigorous defense, challenging the authenticity of the diary, questioning the credibility of Evelyn and Lucas's research, and arguing that the burial ground was not historically significant and had no legal protection. The hearing proceeded with the presentation of evidence and the examination of witnesses. Evelyn and Lucas took the stand, testifying about their research, their discoveries, and their unwavering belief in the importance of preserving Beaumont House. They were subjected to intense cross-examination by Ms. Davies, who tried to poke holes in their testimony and undermine their credibility. Dr. Carter, the handwriting expert, testified about her forensic analysis of the diary, confirming its authenticity beyond any reasonable doubt. Dr. Davies, the president of the Historical Society, testified about the historical significance of Beaumont House and the importance of preserving Charleston's heritage. Thompson's expert witness, Dr. Harding, testified that the burial ground was not historically significant and that the diary was likely a forgery. However, under cross-examination by Mr. Harrison, Dr. Harding's credibility crumbled. Mr. Harrison exposed his bias, his lack of expertise in the relevant historical period, and his financial ties to Thompson. The turning point in the hearing came with the presentation of the evidence regarding Thompson's deliberate concealment of the burial ground. Mr. Harrison presented the emails and internal memos that Lucas had discovered, showing that Thompson had been aware of rumors about a family burial ground on the property, but had actively suppressed the information. This revelation caused a stir in the courtroom. Thompson's face paled, his confident demeanor shattered. Ms. Davies tried to downplay the significance of the evidence, but it was clear that the damage had been done. As the hearing neared its conclusion, Evelyn, inspired by a sudden flash of insight, asked Mr. Harrison to recall Amelia to the stand. Amelia, though nervous, agreed. She took the stand, her eyes fixed on Evelyn. Evelyn, instead of questioning Amelia directly, asked her to read a specific passage from the diary. A passage that had, until now, seemed relatively insignificant, a mere detail about a social event. Amelia, her voice trembling slightly, began to read, "Tonight is the grand ball at the Beaumont House. Everyone who is anyone in Charleston society will be there. I am wearing my finest gown, a pale blue silk with delicate lace trim. I hope to dance with." Evelyn interrupted her. "Miss Beaumont," she asked, "can you describe the ballroom at Beaumont House?" Amelia, initially confused by the question, hesitated. "The ballroom?" she said. It's been closed off for years. It's in a state of disrepair. But can you describe it?" Evelyn persisted. "As it was in its heyday?" Amelia closed her eyes, her mind transported back in time. "It was magnificent," she said, her voice filled with a wistful nostalgia. "The largest room in the house, with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and polished hardwood floors. There were tall windows overlooking the gardens and a balcony, where musicians would play." Evelyn then asked Amelia to read another passage from the diary, a passage describing the aftermath of the ball. "The ball was a success, a dazzling display of wealth and privilege. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. The war is coming, I know it. And everything will change." Evelyn then presented a piece of evidence they had not yet disclosed, a photograph taken in the 1920s, showing a group of people gathered in the Beaumont House ballroom. The photograph was faded and grainy, but it clearly showed the distinctive features of the room: the tall windows, the balcony, the chandeliers. "Miss Beaumont," Evelyn asked, "is this the ballroom you described?" Amelia examined the photograph, her eyes widening in recognition. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, that's it. That's the Beaumont House ballroom." Evelyn then revealed the significance of the photograph. "This photograph," she said, "was taken during a meeting of the Charleston Historical Society. In the 1920s, the Beaumont House ballroom was used as a venue for historical gatherings, lectures, and events. It was recognized, even then, as a place of historical significance." This revelation was a bombshell. It established that Beaumont House, and specifically its ballroom, had a documented history of association with the Charleston Historical Society, a fact that significantly strengthened their claim for its preservation. It also provided a direct link between the diary, the house, and the historical context of their case. It wasn't just about a burial ground, it was about a house that had played a role, even after the Civil War, in preserving and celebrating Charleston's history. The forgotten ball, mentioned in passing in the diary, had become the key to saving the entire house. Chapter 20. Echoes of Love. The revelation of the Beaumont House ballroom's historical significance and its connection to the Charleston Historical Society sent ripples of excitement through the courtroom. It was a powerful and unexpected twist, a testament to Evelyn's sharp intellect and her meticulous attention to detail. Thompson's legal team was visibly shaken. Ms. Davies attempted to downplay the significance of the photograph, arguing that it was irrelevant to the issue of the burial ground and the pre-existing encumbrance. But her arguments were weak and unconvincing. The judge, who had been listening intently throughout the hearing, seemed to be swayed by Evelyn and Lucas's evidence. After a brief recess, the judge delivered his ruling. He declared that the contract between Amelia Beaumont and Mr. Thompson was void, due to Thompson's failure to disclose the existence of the legally protected burial ground and his deliberate concealment of information. He also granted a permanent injunction against the demolition of Beaumont House, recognizing its historical significance and ordering its preservation. The courtroom erupted in applause. Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia embraced, tears of joy and relief streaming down their faces. They had done it. They had saved Beaumont House. They had honored the memory of Eliza and her child, and they had exposed Thompson's deceitful practices. The victory was not just a legal triumph, it was a moral victory, a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of historical preservation, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. In the days following the court hearing, Beaumont House became a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even the most forgotten stories can be brought to light, and that even the most powerful forces of greed and destruction can be overcome. Evelyn and Lucas, their names now synonymous with a successful campaign to save Beaumont House, were hailed as local heroes. They received countless messages of support and congratulations, and their story was featured in national and international media. Amelia, freed from the burden of her family secrets and the threat of financial ruin, experienced a profound transformation. She embraced her newfound role as the guardian of Beaumont House, dedicating herself to its restoration and preservation. She opened the house to the public, sharing its history with visitors from all over the world. The burial ground, now officially recognized and protected, was carefully excavated. The remains of Eliza and her child were found, their identities confirmed through DNA testing. They were given a proper burial, their graves marked with a simple but elegant monument, inscribed with their names and the words, "Their love endures." As for Evelyn and Lucas, their relationship, forged in the crucible of their shared struggle, continued to blossom. They had found in each other not just a partner in their historical quest, but a soulmate, a kindred spirit, a love that transcended time and circumstance. They decided to stay in Charleston, making Beaumont House their home. They worked together, restoring the house to its former glory, transforming it into a museum and a research center dedicated to the history of the Civil War era and the lives of those who had been affected by it. They also continued their research, delving deeper into the stories of Eliza and Robert and the other inhabitants of Beaumont House. They uncovered new details, new perspectives, new layers of meaning, constantly adding to the rich tapestry of the house's history. One evening, as they were sitting on the porch of Beaumont House, watching the sunset over the Ashley River, Lucas turned to Evelyn, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. "You know," he said, "I came here a cynical, broken man, searching for a story to distract myself from my own pain. I never expected to find this. To find you." Evelyn smiled, her heart overflowing with happiness. "And I," she said, "came here a lonely, retired woman, seeking a purpose, a way to make a difference. I never imagined I would find love, a second chance." He took her hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her. "Eliza and Robert," he said, "their love story was cut short by tragedy. But their love, it echoes through time. It brought us together. It gave us a purpose. And it gave us each other." Evelyn nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "Their love story," she said, "became our love story." He leaned in and kissed her, a slow, tender kiss that sealed their bond, a kiss that celebrated their shared journey, their shared triumph, and their enduring love. The echoes of love, the whispers of the past, had brought them together, and now their own love story would become a part of the rich and enduring legacy of Beaumont House. The house, once slated for destruction, was now a testament to the power of love, the importance of history, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Chapter 21. A Second Chance. The transformation of Beaumont House into a museum and research center was a labor of love for Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia. They poured their hearts and souls into the project, meticulously restoring the house to its former glory, while also ensuring that it was equipped to serve its new purpose. They worked closely with architects, historians, and preservation experts, carefully preserving the original features of the house, while also incorporating modern amenities and technologies. They repaired the crumbling walls, restored the faded murals, polished the antique furniture, and brought the overgrown gardens back to life. The ballroom, once a symbol of forgotten grandeur, was restored to its former magnificence. The crystal chandeliers were cleaned and rewired, the hardwood floors were polished to a gleaming shine, and the tall windows were repaired, offering breathtaking views of the gardens and the Ashley River. The attic, where Evelyn and Lucas had first discovered Eliza's letters, was transformed into a state-of-the-art research center, equipped with climate-controlled storage for historical documents, computers, and other research tools. The house was filled with exhibits that told the story of Eliza and Robert, the Civil War era, and the lives of the people who had inhabited Beaumont House. The exhibits included original artifacts, letters, photographs, and interactive displays that brought the past to life. Amelia, who had once been so eager to sell the house, became its most passionate advocate. She took on the role of curator, meticulously researching and documenting the history of her family and the house. She discovered a newfound pride in her heritage, a sense of connection to the past that she had never experienced before. Evelyn and Lucas, now living together in Beaumont House, found their relationship deepening with each passing day. They shared a love for history, a passion for storytelling, and a deep commitment to preserving the past. They also shared a profound sense of connection, a love that had blossomed amidst the dust and echoes of a long-forgotten story. They often found themselves working late into the night, poring over historical documents, discussing their research, and sharing their thoughts and ideas. Their conversations were a constant exchange of knowledge, insights, and emotions, a dance of minds and hearts that enriched their lives and strengthened their bond. One evening, as they were working in the research center, Lucas stumbled upon a small, leather-bound book tucked away in a drawer. The book was old, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. He carefully opened it, his eyes widening in surprise. "Evelyn," he said, his voice filled with excitement, "look at this." Evelyn came over and looked at the book. It was a diary, written in a familiar, flowing hand. But it wasn't Amelia's diary. It was Eliza's. They stared at each other, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They had found another piece of the puzzle, another voice from the past. They carefully examined the diary, their fingers tracing the delicate script. The entries detailed Eliza's daily life, her thoughts on the war, her fears for Robert's safety, and her unwavering love for him. But there was something else. Something that made their hearts skip a beat. In one of the entries, Eliza wrote about her pregnancy, her joy at the prospect of becoming a mother, and her determination to protect her child, no matter what. And then, in a subsequent entry, she wrote about her secret plan. A plan to ensure her child's survival, should anything happen to her or Robert. "I have entrusted my dearest friend, Sarah, with a secret. She has agreed to help me, to protect my child, should the worst come to pass. I have given her a sum of money and instructions to take the baby to a safe place, far away from Charleston, far away from my family's reach." Evelyn and Lucas exchanged a look of astonishment. This was a new revelation, a twist in the story that they had never anticipated. Eliza had not only given birth to a daughter, but she had also made arrangements for her child's safety, entrusting her to a friend named Sarah. But who was Sarah? And where had she taken the child? The diary provided a clue. In a later entry, Eliza mentioned that Sarah was married to a man named Hawthorne. Lucas gasped. "Hawthorne?" he said. "But that's my family name." Evelyn nodded, her mind racing. "It's possible," she said. "It's possible that Eliza's child was raised by a member of your family, that she survived." This discovery gave them a new sense of purpose, a new direction for their research. They were no longer just searching for the past, they were searching for a living descendant of Eliza and Robert, a person whose life had been shaped by the events that had unfolded at Beaumont House over a century ago. It was truly a second chance. A second chance for Eliza's child to be known. A second chance for the truth to be fully revealed. And a second chance for Evelyn and Lucas to make a profound difference, not just in the lives of those long gone, but in the life of someone living, breathing, and connected to them through the enduring threads of history and love. Their own second chance at love had led them to this, and they were determined to follow the trail wherever it might lead. Chapter 22. The Auction. The revelation that Eliza's child might have survived, and that her friend Sarah was married to a Hawthorne, sent Evelyn and Lucas on a new and urgent quest. They needed to trace Sarah's identity and follow the Hawthorne lineage to determine if Eliza's daughter had indeed been raised within Lucas's extended family. They began by revisiting the family Bibles and genealogical records they had previously examined, focusing on any mention of a Sarah Hawthorne. They also searched online databases, historical archives, and census records, hoping to find any clue that might lead them to her. The search was challenging, as the name Sarah Hawthorne was relatively common, and the records from that era were often incomplete or inaccurate. They encountered numerous dead ends, frustrating delays, and conflicting information. However, their persistence paid off. They eventually found a record of a Sarah Hawthorne living in Charleston during the Civil War, who was married to a man named Thomas Hawthorne, a distant cousin of Robert Hawthorne. This Sarah Hawthorne had no children of her own listed in any records they could find. This was a promising lead, but it was not conclusive. They needed to find more evidence to confirm that this Sarah Hawthorne was indeed the woman Eliza had entrusted with her child. Evelyn suggested they expand their search beyond genealogical records and explore other historical sources, such as letters, diaries, and local histories. She reasoned that if Sarah had taken in Eliza's child, there might be some mention of it, however veiled, in the writings of people who knew her. They returned to the Charleston Historical Society, poring over their vast collection of documents, searching for any reference to Sarah Hawthorne or to an unexplained child appearing in the Hawthorne family. After days of searching, Lucas stumbled upon a collection of letters written by a woman named Eliza Pringle, a contemporary of Eliza Beaumont and a close friend of Sarah Hawthorne. The letters detailed the social life of Charleston during and after the Civil War, and they contained numerous references to Sarah Hawthorne. One letter in particular caught their attention. It was written in 1866, shortly after the end of the war. Poor Sarah is still grieving the loss of her husband, Thomas. He was killed in the final days of the war, a senseless tragedy. But she has found solace in a new responsibility, a child, a beautiful little girl whom she has taken in. She says the child is a distant relative, orphaned by the war. But there is something mysterious about the situation. Something Sarah is not telling me. Evelyn and Lucas exchanged a look of excitement. This was it, the confirmation they had been searching for. Eliza Pringle's letter provided strong circumstantial evidence that Sarah Hawthorne had indeed taken in Eliza's child, and that she had kept the child's true identity a secret. They continued to read through Eliza Pringle's letters, hoping to find more information about the child. In a later letter, they found a reference to the child's name. Sarah's little girl is growing up so fast. She is a bright, cheerful child, with a spirit that reminds me so much of someone I used to know. Sarah calls her Lily. Lily. Eliza's daughter's name was Lily. With this new information, they were able to trace the Hawthorne lineage forward in time. They discovered that Sarah Hawthorne had raised Lily as her own, and that Lily had eventually married and had children of her own. They followed the family tree, generation after generation, until they reached the present day. And then they found her, a woman named Lillian Hawthorne Carter, living in Atlanta, Georgia. A direct descendant of Sarah Hawthorne and, potentially, the great-granddaughter of Eliza Beaumont and Robert Hawthorne. Evelyn and Lucas were stunned. They had found her. They had found a living link to the past, a descendant of the love story that had brought them together. They immediately contacted Lillian, sending her a letter explaining their research and their discovery of her potential connection to Eliza and Robert. They were careful not to overwhelm her with too much information, knowing that this revelation could be shocking and disruptive. Lillian, initially skeptical, agreed to meet with them. She was a woman in her early 70s, a retired teacher, with a warm smile and intelligent eyes. She listened intently as Evelyn and Lucas explained their story, showing her the letters, the diary entries, and the genealogical records. She was amazed, overwhelmed, and deeply moved. She had always known that she was a descendant of the Hawthornes, but she had never known the full story of her family history, the secret of Eliza and Robert's love, and the tragic fate of their child. She agreed to provide a DNA sample to confirm her connection to Eliza and Robert. The results came back a few weeks later. It was a match. Lillian Hawthorne Carter was, indeed, the great-granddaughter of Eliza Beaumont and Robert Hawthorne. The discovery of Lillian was a momentous occasion, a culmination of their long and arduous journey. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of historical research, and the enduring legacy of love. But it was also a reminder of the injustices of the past, the secrets and lies that had separated families and erased lives. Lillian had grown up not knowing her true heritage, unaware of the tragic story of her ancestors. Evelyn and Lucas, with Amelia's blessing, decided to hold a special event at Beaumont House, a gathering to honor the memory of Eliza and Robert, to celebrate the discovery of Lillian, and to share their story with the world. They invited Lillian and her family, members of the Historical Society, local dignitaries, journalists, and the many people who had supported their efforts to save Beaumont House. The event was held in the beautifully restored ballroom, the same room where Eliza had danced, the same room where the Charleston Historical Society had held its meetings. The room was filled with music, laughter, and tears, as people from all walks of life came together to celebrate the power of history, the importance of remembrance, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. During the event, a local auctioneer, known for his charitable work and a distant relative of Amelia, volunteered his services. He auctioned off several historical items related to the Beaumont house and the story replicas of the locket, framed copies of the letters, even a piece of the lightning-scarred oak that had been carefully preserved. The proceeds went to the Beaumont House Restoration Fund, ensuring that the house would continue to serve as a museum and a research center for generations to come. The auction was a success, not only financially, but also symbolically. It represented the reclaiming of the past, the transformation of a place of secrets and lies into a place of openness and truth. It was a celebration of the power of community, the importance of shared history, and the enduring legacy of love. And for Evelyn and Lucas, standing hand in hand, watching the joyful scene unfold, it was a confirmation that their own love story, born amidst the echoes of the past, had a bright and enduring future. Chapter 23. Heartbreak Hotel. The celebratory atmosphere surrounding Beaumont House and the unveiling of its long-held secrets was a stark contrast to the situation facing Mr. Thompson. His development project was dead, his reputation was in tatters, and his financial empire was crumbling. He had lost everything, his ambition and greed leading to his ultimate downfall. He had retreated to his lavish penthouse apartment, overlooking the Charleston skyline, a view that now mocked him with its beauty and promise. He was a broken man, isolated and alone, haunted by the consequences of his actions. He had tried to fight back, to salvage his reputation and his project, but it was futile. The evidence against him was overwhelming, the public opinion was firmly against him, and his legal options had been exhausted. His investors had abandoned him, his political allies had distanced themselves, and his once loyal staff had deserted him. He was a pariah, an outcast, a symbol of greed and historical insensitivity. One evening, as he was sitting alone in his darkened apartment, staring out at the city lights, he received a call from his lawyer, Ms. Davies. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice devoid of its usual confidence, "I'm afraid I have some bad news." "What is it?" Thompson asked, his voice weary. "Can it possibly get any worse?" "The bank is foreclosing on your properties," Ms. Davies said. "All of them, including this penthouse." Thompson was stunned. He had known he was in financial trouble, but he had never imagined it would come to this. He was about to lose everything, his home, his possessions, his entire way of life. There's nothing you can do?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'm afraid not," Ms. Davies replied. "I've exhausted all legal avenues. There's nothing more I can do for you, Mr. Thompson. I'm sorry." She hung up, leaving Thompson alone in the silence of his empty apartment. He felt a wave of despair wash over him, a sense of utter hopelessness. He had hit rock bottom. He walked over to the window, his gaze fixed on the city below. He saw the lights of Beaumont House, twinkling in the distance, a beacon of hope and resilience. He had tried to destroy that house, to erase its history, to build his own monument to greed and ambition. But he had failed, and now he was paying the price. He thought of Evelyn and Lucas, the two people who had stood up to him, who had fought for what they believed in, who had ultimately defeated him. He had underestimated them, dismissed them as meddling historians, sentimental fools. But they had proven to be far stronger, far more resourceful than he had ever imagined. He felt a flicker of regret, a sense of what might have been, if he had chosen a different path, if he had listened to his conscience instead of his greed. But it was too late. The damage was done. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences. He decided to leave Charleston, to escape the scene of his defeat, to try to start over somewhere new. He packed a small bag, taking only a few essential items. He had no destination in mind, no plan for the future. He was simply running away, hoping to outrun his past, his failures, his shame. As he was leaving his penthouse, he noticed a small, framed photograph on a table. It was a picture of him, taken years ago, when he was a young, ambitious developer, full of dreams and optimism. He picked up the photograph, his fingers tracing the image of his younger self. He saw a flicker of innocence in those eyes, a spark of idealism that had long since been extinguished. He sighed, a deep, shuddering sigh that seemed to release all the pent-up tension and despair he had been carrying. He placed the photograph back on the table, a reminder of who he once was, and who he could never be again. He walked out of the apartment, leaving behind his lavish lifestyle, his failed dreams, and the ruins of his empire. He walked out into the night, a solitary figure, lost and alone, heading towards an uncertain future. The Heartbreak Hotel, as he now ironically thought of his grand, empty penthouse, was behind him. And all that lay ahead was the long, lonely road of reckoning and, perhaps, eventually, a chance at redemption. But for now, all he felt was the crushing weight of his defeat, a defeat that was as much internal as it was external. Chapter 24. Reclaiming the Past. With Beaumont House safe and Thompson's threat neutralized, Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia turn their attention to the ongoing restoration and the development of the museum and research center. The victory had galvanized them, strengthening their resolve to create a lasting tribute to the history of the house and the lives of those who had inhabited it. The restoration work continued apace, with skilled craftsmen and artisans meticulously repairing and restoring the original features of the house. The walls were repainted in their original colors, the murals were cleaned and retouched, the floors were polished, and the antique furniture was carefully restored. The gardens, too, were brought back to life. The overgrown lawns were mowed, the flower beds were replanted with heritage varieties, and the ancient oak tree, the silent witness to so much history, was carefully tended and preserved. As the house began to regain its former glory, Evelyn, Lucas, and Amelia focused on developing the exhibits for the museum. They worked closely with historians, curators, and designers, creating a series of displays that told the story of Beaumont House, from its construction in the 18th century to its role in the Civil War and its eventual transformation into a museum. The exhibits included original artifacts, letters, photographs, and interactive displays that brought the past to life. Visitors could explore the lives of the Beaumont family, learn about the social and political context of the Civil War era, and discover the hidden stories of Eliza, Robert, and their lost child. The ballroom, now fully restored, became the centerpiece of the museum. It was used for special events, lectures, concerts, and historical reenactments, bringing a sense of life and vibrancy back to the once silent space. The research center, housed in the former attic, became a hub for historical scholarship. It attracted researchers and students from all over the world, who came to study the extensive collection of documents, letters, and artifacts related to Beaumont House and the surrounding area. Amelia, who had once been so reluctant to embrace her family's history, became the driving force behind the museum. She immersed herself in the research, meticulously documenting the lives of her ancestors and sharing her knowledge with visitors. She discovered a newfound sense of purpose and fulfillment, transforming her initial shame and denial into a passionate commitment to preserving the past. Evelyn and Lucas, now living together in Beaumont House as a couple, found their relationship deepening with each passing day. They shared a love for history, a passion for storytelling, and a deep commitment to each other. They had found, in the midst of a historical mystery, a love that was both timeless and enduring. They continued their research, delving deeper into the lives of Eliza and Robert and tracing the descendants of their lost child. They worked closely with Lillian Hawthorne Carter, the great-granddaughter of Eliza and Robert, who became a frequent visitor to Beaumont House and a valuable source of family history. One day, as they were working in the research center, Evelyn stumbled upon a small, wooden box tucked away in a drawer. The box was unfamiliar, and it was not labeled. She carefully opened it, her heart pounding with anticipation. Inside the box, she found a collection of items that appeared to belong to Eliza. A silver hair comb, a delicate lace handkerchief, a small, dried flower, and a handwritten poem. The poem was unsigned, but Evelyn recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Robert's. She carefully unfolded the poem, her fingers tracing the elegant script. It was a love poem, written by Robert to Eliza, expressing his undying devotion to her. My dearest Eliza, my heart's true desire, your beauty ignites an unquenchable fire. Though war may divide us, and fate intervene, my love for you, darling, will ever be keen. Your smile is the sunrise, your eyes are the stars that guide me through darkness and heal all my scars. I dream of the day when we'll finally be free to live out our lives, just you and just me. So wait for me, darling, have faith and be strong. Our love will endure where we truly belong. And even if death should claim me as its own, my spirit will find you. You'll never be alone. Evelyn felt tears welling up in her eyes. The poem was a powerful testament to Robert's love for Eliza, a love that had transcended time and circumstance. It was a tangible link to the past, a reminder of the enduring power of the human heart. She showed the poem to Lucas, who was equally moved. They decided to include the poem in the museum's exhibit as a centerpiece of Eliza and Robert's love story. The discovery of the poem and the other personal items belonging to Eliza added a new layer of intimacy and emotion to the museum. It brought visitors closer to the people who had lived and loved within the walls of Beaumont House, making their stories even more real and relatable. Reclaiming the past was not just about restoring a house, it was about restoring lives, honoring memories, and ensuring that the stories of those who had been silenced would finally be heard. And for Evelyn and Lucas, it was about building a future together, a future rooted in the past, but filled with the promise of a love that would endure for all time. Chapter 25. Letters Unsent. The ongoing research and the development of the Beaumont House Museum continued to unearth new details and surprising connections, deepening the understanding of the lives and legacies of those who had inhabited the historic home. While the focus had primarily been on Eliza, Robert, and Amelia, Evelyn and Lucas began to explore the stories of the other individuals who had played a role in the Beaumont House saga, including the enslaved people who had worked on the plantation and the servants who had maintained the house. They discovered that the Beaumont family had kept meticulous records of their enslaved workers, including their names, ages, skills, and family relationships. These records, though chilling in their reflection of the brutal reality of slavery, provided valuable insights into the lives of those who had been denied their freedom and forced to labor for the benefit of others. Evelyn and Lucas were determined to honor the memory of these individuals, to give them a voice, and to ensure that their stories were included in the museum's exhibits. They worked with African American historians and community leaders, seeking their guidance and expertise in interpreting the records and presenting the information in a sensitive and respectful manner. They created a dedicated exhibit that focused on the lives of the enslaved people at Beaumont House, highlighting their resilience, their skills, their cultural traditions, and their contributions to the plantation's operation. The exhibit included photographs, artifacts, and interactive displays that allowed visitors to learn about the daily lives, struggles, and triumphs of these individuals. They also discovered that some of the enslaved people had been skilled artisans, creating beautiful furniture, intricate metalwork, and delicate textiles. They were able to identify some of these items within the Beaumont House collection, and they showcased them in the museum, highlighting the artistry and craftsmanship of these unsung creators. As they delved deeper into the history of the enslaved people, they uncovered a remarkable story. They found evidence that several of the enslaved individuals had been involved in the Underground Railroad, helping other enslaved people escape to freedom. They discovered hidden compartments within the house, secret passages that had been used to shelter runaway slaves. They also found coded messages hidden within quilts and other seemingly innocuous objects that contained instructions and directions for those seeking freedom. This discovery added a new layer of complexity and significance to the Beaumont House story. It revealed that the house had been not only a place of oppression and injustice, but also a place of resistance and hope. Evelyn and Lucas were determined to share this story with the world. They created a special exhibit that focused on the Underground Railroad and the role that Beaumont House had played in helping enslaved people escape to freedom. As they continued their research, they stumbled upon another unexpected discovery. They found a box of unsent letters written by some of the enslaved people at Beaumont House. The letters were addressed to family members and loved ones who had been sold away to other plantations or who had escaped to freedom. The letters were filled with expressions of love, longing, hope, and despair. They provided a powerful and poignant glimpse into the hearts and minds of those who had been denied their basic human rights. One letter in particular caught their attention. It was written by a young woman named Sarah to her sister, who had been sold away to a plantation in Mississippi. "My dearest sister, I miss you more than words can say. Every day, I pray for your safety and your well-being. I dream of the day when we will be reunited, when we will be free to live our lives as we choose. I have learned to read and write, thanks to the kindness of Miss Eliza. She has taught me in secret, sharing her books and her knowledge with me. She says that education is the key to freedom, and I believe her. I have also learned about a secret path, a path to freedom. It is a dangerous path, but it is a path of hope. I pray that one day I will be brave enough to take it, and that I will find you again." Evelyn and Lucas were stunned. This letter, written by an enslaved woman named Sarah, revealed a connection to Eliza Beaumont that they had never anticipated. Eliza, despite her own privileged position, had secretly taught Sarah to read and write, empowering her with the tools of knowledge and liberation. It also suggested a possible link between Eliza's friendship with the Sarah Hawthorne who saved Lily, and this Sarah, the enslaved woman. Perhaps the connection ran deeper than they'd imagined. They realized that the unsent letters, like the letters of Eliza and Robert, were a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, the ability to find hope and connection even in the darkest of circumstances. They decided to create a special exhibit dedicated to these letters, allowing visitors to read them, to hear the voices of those who had been silenced for too long. The letters, though unsent in their time, were finally finding their recipients, not in the individuals they were originally intended for, but in the hearts and minds of those who encountered them centuries later. They were a reminder that the past is never truly past, that it continues to shape our present, and that the stories of those who came before us deserve to be heard, honored, and remembered. Letters Unsent became not just a title for an exhibit, but a poignant theme that resonated throughout the entire museum, a testament to the enduring power of communication, connection, and the human spirit. Chapter 26. The Confession. The discovery of the unsent letters written by the enslaved people at Beaumont House, and particularly Sarah's letter mentioning Eliza's secret tutoring, spurred Evelyn and Lucas to re-examine all the existing evidence, seeking a deeper understanding of the relationships between the various individuals connected to the house. They revisited Eliza's diary, Amelia's diary, and the letters of Eliza and Robert, searching for any clues that might shed light on Eliza's character and her interactions with the enslaved people. They also re-interviewed Lillian Hawthorne Carter, hoping to learn more about her family history and any stories that might have been passed down through the generations. As they delved deeper into the records, they began to notice a pattern. Eliza's diary, while primarily focused on her love for Robert and her concerns about the war, contained numerous subtle references to her interactions with the enslaved people. She often mentioned their names, their skills, their personalities, and their struggles. She expressed empathy for their plight, and she often questioned the morality of slavery. Amelia's diary, too, contained clues. While Amelia was initially more focused on her own social life and her family status, her later entries revealed a growing awareness of the injustices of slavery and a sense of guilt for her family's involvement in it. Lillian Hawthorne Carter, during their conversations, shared a story that had been passed down through her family. It was a story about her great-great-grandmother, Sarah Hawthorne, the woman who had raised Eliza's child. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about Sarah," Lillian said. She said that Sarah was a kind and compassionate woman who had a deep respect for all people, regardless of their race or social status. She said that Sarah had been secretly involved in helping enslaved people escape to freedom. This story resonated with Evelyn and Lucas, confirming their suspicions about Sarah Hawthorne's character and her potential involvement in the Underground Railroad. It also suggested a possible connection between Sarah Hawthorne and the enslaved Sarah who had written the letter. They decided to focus their research on this potential connection. They returned to the Charleston Historical Society, searching for any records that might link the two Sarahs. After days of searching, they found a document that made their hearts skip a beat. It was a bill of sale, recording the transfer of ownership of an enslaved woman named Sarah from the Beaumont plantation to Thomas Hawthorne, shortly before his marriage to Sarah Smith, the maiden name they'd uncovered for Sarah Hawthorne. The bill of sale described Sarah as a young woman, skilled in sewing and literacy. This was a crucial piece of evidence. It confirmed that the enslaved Sarah and Sarah Hawthorne were, at one time, both connected to the Beaumont plantation. It also suggested that Thomas Hawthorne had purchased Sarah's freedom, perhaps at the request of his future wife, or perhaps as a wedding gift. Evelyn and Lucas realized the profound implications of this discovery. Eliza, defying the social norms of her time, had not only taught an enslaved woman to read and write, but she had also likely played a role in securing her freedom. And Sarah Hawthorne, in turn, had repaid Eliza's kindness by protecting her child, raising her as her own. They decided to share this new information with Amelia, knowing that it would challenge her understanding of her family history and force her to confront the complex and often contradictory nature of the past. They met with Amelia in the Beaumont House library, the same room where so much of the story had unfolded. They carefully explained their findings, showing her the bill of sale and the other evidence they had gathered. Amelia listened intently, her expression shifting from surprise to disbelief to a dawning realization. She had always believed that her family, despite their involvement in slavery, had been good people, that they had treated their enslaved workers with kindness and respect. But this new evidence challenged that belief. It revealed that Eliza, her ancestor, had been more than just a passive participant in the system of slavery. She had been an active agent of resistance, secretly empowering an enslaved woman and helping her gain her freedom. And it also revealed that Sarah Hawthorne, the woman who had raised Eliza's child, had been more than just a kind and compassionate woman. She had been a former enslaved person herself, a woman who had experienced the horrors of slavery firsthand. Amelia was deeply moved and deeply troubled by this revelation. She realized that her family history was far more complex, far more nuanced than she had ever imagined. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice trembling. This changes everything." Evelyn placed a comforting hand on Amelia's arm. "It doesn't change the fact that your family was involved in slavery," she said softly. "But it does show that there were individuals within your family who questioned the system, who fought against it, who tried to make a difference." Lucas added, "It also shows the incredible resilience and strength of the enslaved people, their ability to survive, to resist, and to find hope in the darkest of circumstances." Amelia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I need time to process this," she said, "to understand what it all means." As Amelia grappled with this new understanding of her family history, Evelyn and Lucas realized that they had uncovered a powerful and poignant story, a story of secret alliances, hidden acts of kindness, and the enduring bonds of friendship and love. They had also uncovered a confession, not written in ink, but etched in the actions of individuals who had dared to defy the conventions of their time, to challenge the injustices of slavery, and to protect the innocent. It was a confession of humanity, of compassion, and of the enduring power of hope. And it was a confession that deserved to be shared, to be remembered, and to be honored. This was a story not of simple good versus evil, but of the complicated reality where individuals, even within systems of oppression, could make choices that resonated with courage and compassion. Chapter 27. Hawthorne's Revelation. The unveiling of Sarah Hawthorne's past as a formerly enslaved woman and her connection to both Eliza Beaumont and the enslaved Sarah added a profound new dimension to the Beaumont House story. It also sparked a renewed interest in Lucas's own family history, prompting him to delve deeper into the Hawthorne lineage and explore the lives of his ancestors. He had always been somewhat detached from his family history, focusing more on his writing and his self-imposed isolation. But the events at Beaumont House had awakened in him a sense of connection to the past, a desire to understand the forces that had shaped his own life and the lives of those who came before him. He knew that Robert Hawthorne, his great-great-grandfather, had been a Confederate soldier and that he had died in battle. He also knew that Robert had been briefly married to a woman named Sarah before meeting Eliza, but that marriage had produced no children. He had never given much thought to the other branches of the Hawthorne family, the distant cousins and relatives who had spread out across the South and beyond. But now, with the discovery of Sarah Hawthorne's connection to Eliza's child, he felt a compelling need to explore those branches, to see if he could find any other traces of Eliza's legacy within his own family tree. He returned to the genealogical records, poring over family Bibles, census records, and online databases. He also contacted distant relatives, seeking information and sharing his discoveries about Robert and Eliza. His research led him to a branch of the Hawthorne family that had settled in Virginia after the Civil War. He discovered that Thomas Hawthorne, Sarah Hawthorne's husband, had a brother named William who had also served in the Confederate Army. William had survived the war and had moved to Virginia, where he had married and had children. Lucas traced William's descendants, generation after generation, until he reached the present day. And then, he found something that made his heart skip a beat. He discovered that one of William Hawthorne's descendants, a man named David Hawthorne, was a historian, specializing in the Civil War era. David Hawthorne lived in Richmond, Virginia, and he was a respected scholar, known for his meticulous research and his insightful publications. Lucas immediately contacted David, sending him an email explaining his connection to Robert Hawthorne and his research into the Beaumont House story. He also mentioned his discovery of Sarah Hawthorne and her potential connection to Eliza's child. David Hawthorne was intrigued. He responded to Lucas's email, expressing his interest in the story and his willingness to meet and discuss it further. Lucas traveled to Richmond, eager to meet this distant relative and share his findings. He found David Hawthorne to be a warm, engaging man with a deep passion for history and a keen interest in his own family's past. They spent hours discussing the Beaumont House story, sharing their research and piecing together the fragmented evidence. David was fascinated by Lucas's discoveries, particularly the revelation of Sarah Hawthorne's past and her connection to Eliza's child. "This is remarkable," David said. "I've always known that our family had some connection to the Civil War, but I never knew the full story. This changes everything." David shared his own research with Lucas, showing him family letters, diaries, and photographs that had been passed down through the generations. He also showed him a small, leather-bound book, a journal that had belonged to William Hawthorne, his ancestor. Lucas carefully examined the journal, his fingers tracing the faded script. The entries detailed William Hawthorne's experiences during the Civil War, his thoughts on the conflict, and his personal struggles. Then, he found an entry that made his breath catch in his throat. "Received a letter from my brother, Thomas, today. He writes of his new wife, Sarah, and of a child, a little girl, whom they have taken in. He says the child is a relative, orphaned by the war. But there is something unsaid. Something that troubles me." Lucas looked up at David, his eyes wide with excitement. This confirms it," he said. "This confirms that Sarah Hawthorne took in Eliza's child." David nodded, his own expression a mixture of awe and wonder.
"It seems so," he said.
"And it also suggests that William Hawthorne knew, or at least suspected, the truth about the child's identity." They continued to examine the journal, searching for any other clues. In a later entry, they found another reference to the child. "Visited Thomas and Sarah in Charleston. Met the little girl, Lily. She is a bright, cheerful child, with a spirit that reminds me of someone I once knew. Sarah seems devoted to her. I pray that they will be safe, that they will find happiness. The someone I once knew was, of course, a reference to Robert." William had likely recognized the resemblance between Lily and his deceased relative, Robert. This entry confirmed that William Hawthorne not only knew about Lily, but he had also met her, and he had likely suspected her connection to Robert. It also suggested that he had approved of Sarah's decision to raise the child, and that he had wished them well. The journal, though not containing an explicit confession, provided strong circumstantial evidence that the Hawthorne family, or at least some members of it, had been aware of Eliza's child and had played a role in protecting her. It was a revelation that added a new layer of complexity and nuance to the story, showing that even within a family divided by war and ideology, there could be acts of kindness, compassion, and secret solidarity. For Lucas, the discovery of the journal was a deeply personal and emotional experience. It connected him to his ancestors in a way he had never felt before. It gave him a sense of belonging, a sense of understanding his own place within the larger tapestry of history. Hawthorne's revelation was not just about his family's past, it was about his own identity, his own connection to a story that had, unknowingly, shaped his life. Chapter 28. The Power of Words. The discovery of William Hawthorne's journal and its confirmation of the Hawthorne family's knowledge of Lily's true identity brought a new sense of closure to the Beaumont House saga. It also reinforced the importance of historical research, the power of uncovering hidden stories, and the enduring legacy of the past. Evelyn and Lucas, with the help of David Hawthorne, continued to explore the Hawthorne family history, tracing the lives of Lily's descendants and piecing together the fragmented narratives of those who had been connected to Beaumont House. They discovered that Lily had grown up to be a strong, independent woman who had inherited her mother's spirit and her father's courage. She had married and had children of her own, and she had passed down the story of her origins to her descendants, ensuring that Eliza and Robert's legacy would never be forgotten. Lillian Hawthorne Carter, upon learning of the full extent of her family history, was deeply moved. She felt a profound connection to Eliza and Robert, and she embraced her role as a living link to their story. She became an active supporter of the Beaumont House Museum, sharing her family history with visitors and participating in educational programs. Amelia Beaumont, too, continued to evolve in her understanding of her family's past. She had come to terms with the complexities and contradictions of her ancestors, acknowledging their involvement in slavery while also recognizing their acts of kindness and resistance. She dedicated herself to ensuring that the Beaumont House Museum would serve as a place of learning, reconciliation, and healing. The museum itself continued to thrive, attracting visitors from all over the world. The exhibits, constantly updated with new discoveries and research, told a powerful and poignant story of love, loss, betrayal, and redemption. The unsent letters, both those of Eliza and Robert and those of the enslaved people, became a central feature of the museum. Visitors were deeply moved by these intimate expressions of human emotion, these voices from the past that spoke so eloquently of the enduring power of hope, resilience, and connection. Evelyn and Lucas, now firmly established as a couple, continued to work together, their shared passion for history and their love for each other fueling their ongoing research and their commitment to preserving the past. They often found themselves reflecting on the power of words, the ability of letters, diaries, and journals to transcend time and circumstance, to connect us to those who came before us, and to illuminate the hidden corners of our shared human experience. They realized that the Beaumont House story was not just about a house or a family or even a specific historical period. It was about the enduring power of human connection, the ability of individuals to make choices that resonate across generations, and the importance of remembering and honoring the past. One evening, as they were sitting on the porch of Beaumont House, watching the sunset over the Ashley River, Evelyn turned to Lucas, her eyes filled with gratitude and love. "You know," she said, "this house has witnessed so much. So much joy, so much sorrow, so much love, so much loss." Lucas nodded, his gaze fixed on the shimmering water. "It has," he said, "and it has brought us together. It has given us a purpose, a shared passion, a love that I never thought I would find." Evelyn reached out and took his hand, her touch sending a familiar warmth through him. "It's a reminder," she said, "that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of connection, of healing, of redemption." They sat in silence for a moment, their hands clasped together, their hearts filled with a sense of peace and contentment. They had come a long way, from their first skeptical encounter to their shared triumph, from their professional collaboration to their enduring love. Lucas, inspired by the events and feeling he needed to fully connect with his own past mistakes and regrets, decided to write a new book. Not a historical fiction this time, but a memoir, a personal account of his journey to Beaumont House, his discoveries, his relationship with Evelyn, and his own transformation. He poured his heart and soul into the book, writing with a raw honesty and vulnerability that he had never before allowed himself to express. He wrote about his lost love, his years of self-imposed isolation, his initial cynicism, and his eventual awakening to the power of history, the importance of human connection, and the enduring possibility of love. He titled the book The Charleston Letters, a tribute to the letters that had brought them together, and a reflection of his own journey of self-discovery. The book became a bestseller, resonating with readers who were moved by Lucas's honesty, his vulnerability, and his inspiring story of redemption. It also brought even more attention to Beaumont House, attracting new visitors and generating renewed interest in the museum and its mission. The power of words, which had been so evident in the historical documents they had uncovered, was now evident in Lucas's own writing. His words had the power to heal, to inspire, to connect, and to transform. And they had the power to bring him full circle, from a cynical, isolated writer to a man who had embraced his past, found love, and discovered his true purpose. Chapter 29. Saving the Mansion. The success of Lucas's memoir, The Charleston Letters, brought a new wave of attention and support to Beaumont House. The museum saw a surge in visitors, donations poured in, and the research center attracted scholars and students from around the globe. The house, once on the brink of demolition, was now thriving, a vibrant center of historical preservation and education. Evelyn and Lucas, buoyed by this success, continued their work, expanding the museum's exhibits, developing new educational programs, and pursuing further research into the lives of those connected to Beaumont House. They also focused on securing the long-term future of the house, ensuring that it would be preserved and protected for generations to come. They established a non-profit foundation dedicated to the preservation of Beaumont House and the promotion of historical research and education. They worked with the city of Charleston and the state of South Carolina to obtain official historical landmark status for the house, providing it with legal protection from any future development or alteration. They also established an endowment fund to provide a stable source of income for the museum's operations and maintenance. They launched a fundraising campaign, reaching out to individuals, corporations, and foundations, seeking their support for the long-term preservation of Beaumont House. The campaign was a resounding success. People from all walks of life, inspired by the Beaumont House story and by Evelyn and Lucas's dedication, contributed generously to the endowment fund. The museum received grants from historical societies, foundations, and government agencies. Amelia Beaumont, who had initially been so reluctant to embrace her family's history, became one of the most passionate advocates for the museum. She served on the board of the nonprofit foundation. She volunteered her time as a docent, and she shared her personal story with visitors, inspiring them with her transformation and her commitment to preserving the past. Lillian Hawthorne Carter, the great-granddaughter of Eliza and Robert, also became actively involved in the museum. She donated family heirlooms, including photographs, letters, and personal items that had belonged to Sarah Hawthorne and Lily. She also shared her family history with researchers and visitors, providing a living link to the Beaumont House story. As the museum grew and thrived, Evelyn and Lucas found themselves increasingly busy, managing the day-to-day operations, overseeing the research projects, and developing new programs and exhibits. But they never lost sight of the core mission of Beaumont House, to honor the memory of those who had lived there, to share their stories with the world, and to promote understanding and reconciliation. One day, as they were working in the research center, they received a surprising phone call. It was from a lawyer, representing a group of investors who were interested in purchasing a large tract of land adjacent to Beaumont House. The investors, the lawyer explained, were planning to develop a luxury resort, complete with a hotel, a golf course, and high-end residences. They were aware of the historical significance of Beaumont House, and they were proposing a partnership with the museum. They would provide funding for the museum's expansion, and they would incorporate the history of Beaumont House into the design and marketing of their resort. Evelyn and Lucas were wary of the proposal. They had fought so hard to save Beaumont House from development, and they were reluctant to compromise their principles or risk jeopardizing the integrity of the museum. They met with the investors, carefully listening to their proposal and asking probing questions. They discovered that the investors were genuinely interested in preserving the history of Beaumont House, and that they were willing to work with the museum to ensure that their development project would be sensitive to the surrounding environment and the historical context. After much deliberation, Evelyn and Lucas, with the approval of the nonprofit foundation's board, decided to negotiate with the investors. They established a set of strict guidelines, ensuring that the development project would not encroach on the Beaumont House property, that it would not detract from the historical significance of the site, and that it would provide tangible benefits to the museum. The negotiations were long and complex, but eventually, they reached an agreement. The investors agreed to purchase a smaller tract of land, further away from Beaumont House. They agreed to create a buffer zone between the resort and the museum, preserving the natural beauty of the surrounding landscape. They also agreed to provide significant funding for the museum's endowment fund, ensuring its long-term financial stability. The agreement was a win-win situation. It allowed for responsible development that would benefit the local economy, while also protecting the historical integrity of Beaumont House and providing much-needed funding for the museum. Saving the mansion, they realized, was not just about preventing its demolition, it was about ensuring its long-term survival, its ability to thrive as a center of history, education, and community engagement. And it was about finding a balance between preservation and progress, between honoring the past and embracing the future. The agreement with the developers, though initially met with some skepticism, ultimately proved to be a crucial step in securing the enduring legacy of Beaumont House, ensuring that it would continue to inspire and educate generations to come. Chapter 30. A Charleston Legacy. Years passed, and Beaumont House continued to flourish as a museum and research center, a testament to the enduring power of history, the importance of preservation, and the transformative potential of love and reconciliation. Evelyn and Lucas, now gracefully aging, remained deeply involved in the museum's operations, their passion for history undiminished, their love for each other a constant source of strength and inspiration. They had become pillars of the Charleston community, respected for their scholarship, their dedication, and their unwavering commitment to preserving the past. Amelia Beaumont, having fully embraced her family's history and her role as the guardian of Beaumont House, had become a beloved figure in Charleston society. She was known for her warmth, her generosity, and her tireless efforts to promote historical awareness and education. She often gave tours of the museum, sharing her personal story with visitors and inspiring them with her transformation. Lillian Hawthorne Carter, the great-granddaughter of Eliza and Robert, remained a close friend and advisor to the museum. She had become a passionate advocate for genealogical research, helping others trace their family histories and discover their own connections to the past. The museum itself continued to expand and evolve, adding new exhibits, developing new programs, and attracting visitors from all over the world. The research center became a renowned hub for historical scholarship, attracting researchers and students who were eager to delve into the rich and complex history of Beaumont House and the surrounding area. The story of Eliza and Robert, once a hidden secret, was now widely known and celebrated. Their love story, their tragic fate, and the enduring legacy of their child had become a part of Charleston's cultural heritage, a reminder of the enduring power of the human spirit. The unsent letters, both those of Eliza and Robert and those of the enslaved people, remained a central feature of the museum. Visitors were deeply moved by these intimate expressions of human emotion, these voices from the past that spoke so eloquently of love, loss, hope, and resilience. The ballroom, once a symbol of forgotten grandeur, was now a vibrant center of community life. It hosted weddings, concerts, lectures, and historical reenactments, bringing a sense of joy and celebration to the once silent space. One day, Evelyn and Lucas found themselves standing on the porch of Beaumont House, watching the sunset over the Ashley River. They had been reflecting on their journey, on all that they had accomplished, and on the enduring legacy of Beaumont House. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Evelyn said, her voice filled with a sense of wonder. "How this house, once on the brink of destruction, has become a beacon of hope and inspiration." Lucas nodded, his gaze fixed on the shimmering water.
"It is," he said.
And it's a reminder that even the most forgotten stories can be brought to light, that even the most broken hearts can be healed, that even the most divided communities can find common ground. He reached out and took Evelyn's hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her. "We did it, Evelyn," he said. "We saved Beaumont House. And we found something even more precious along the way." Evelyn smiled, her eyes glistening with tears.
"We did," she said.
"We found each other." They stood in silence for a moment, their hands clasped together, their hearts filled with gratitude and love. They had come a long way, from their first skeptical encounter to their shared triumph, from their professional collaboration to their enduring partnership. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the landscape, they knew that their journey was far from over. There were still stories to be uncovered, still lessons to be learned, still connections to be made. But they also knew that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead together, united by their shared passion for history, their commitment to preserving the past, and their enduring love for each other. Beaumont House, once a symbol of secrets and lies, had become a symbol of hope and reconciliation, a place where the past was honored, the present was celebrated, and the future was embraced. It was a Charleston legacy, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, and a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of light, of love, and of redemption. And as Evelyn and Lucas knew, standing hand in hand, their own love story was now, and forever would be, an integral part of that legacy. The Charleston letters, both those sent and unsent, had woven a tapestry of lives, loves, and losses, a tapestry that now included them, a tapestry that would continue to grow and evolve for generations to come. Epilogue. 20 years later, a young woman named Eliza Carter Hawthorne stood on the porch of Beaumont House, gazing out at the Ashley River. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking spectacle that mirrored the beauty and complexity of the history she had come to cherish. Eliza was the granddaughter of Evelyn and Lucas, named for the woman whose story had brought her grandparents together. She had grown up surrounded by the echoes of the past, immersed in the tales of Beaumont House, the Civil War, and the enduring love of Eliza Beaumont and Robert Hawthorne. She had inherited her grandparents' passion for history, their commitment to preserving the past, and their unwavering belief in the power of human connection. She had studied history at university, and she was now working as a curator at the Beaumont House Museum, following in the footsteps of her beloved grandparents. Evelyn and Lucas were gone now, but their legacy lived on in the thriving museum, in the vibrant community they had helped to build, and in the hearts of those who had known and loved them. Their final resting place was in the Beaumont family burial ground, close to Eliza and Robert. A simple marker bore both their names, intertwined like the letters of their names in the title of Lucas's book and intertwined with the markers of Eliza, Robert, and Lily. Amelia Beaumont had passed away peacefully a few years after Evelyn and Lucas, her final years filled with a sense of purpose and fulfillment that she had never known before. She had left a generous bequest to the museum, ensuring its continued success. Lillian Hawthorne Carter, now in her 90s, was still a frequent visitor to Beaumont House, sharing her family history with visitors and inspiring them with her stories. The museum itself continued to evolve, adapting to new technologies and new discoveries, but always remaining true to its core mission, to honor the memory of those who had lived at Beaumont House, to share their stories with the world, and to promote understanding and reconciliation. As Eliza stood on the porch, she felt a deep connection to the past, a sense of belonging to something larger than herself. She thought of her grandparents, of their love story, of their dedication to preserving history, and of the legacy they had left behind. She also thought of Eliza Beaumont and Robert Hawthorne, of their tragic love, of their lost child, and of the enduring power of their story. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for their lives, for their struggles, and for the sacrifices they had made. She knew that her work at Beaumont House was more than just a job. It was a calling, a responsibility, a sacred trust. She was a guardian of the past, a keeper of memories, a storyteller for generations to come. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Eliza turned and walked back into the house. The lights were on, illuminating the exhibits, welcoming visitors, and casting a warm glow over the rooms where so much history had unfolded. She walked through the ballroom, imagining the grand balls of the past, the music, the laughter, the whispered secrets. She walked through the library, remembering the countless hours her grandparents had spent poring over documents, uncovering the hidden stories of Beaumont House. She walked up the stairs to the research center, the former attic where it all began. She sat down at her desk, surrounded by the letters, diaries, and artifacts that had brought her grandparents together and that now connected her to the past. She opened her laptop and began to write. She was working on a new exhibit focusing on the lives of the enslaved people at Beaumont House. She was determined to give them a voice, to share their stories, to ensure that their contributions to the history of the house would never be forgotten. As she wrote, she felt the presence of her grandparents, guiding her, inspiring her, and reminding her of the enduring power of words, the importance of history, and the transformative potential of love. The legacy of Beaumont House, the legacy of Eliza and Robert, the legacy of Evelyn and Lucas lived on in her and in the stories she would continue to tell. The Charleston letters continued to be written, not on paper, but in the lives of those who carried the torch of remembrance and hope.